Chapter 1278. Money and manpower were Yang Chendong's biggest advantages. Whether it was the Security Bureau or the CIA, they had developed strongly over the years, and many outstanding talents had emerged. Ning Gang was one of them. He graduated with excellent results in the graduation examination, and stayed with Director Yang San for half a year. After his vision and thinking had been greatly improved, he was finally demoted and became the intelligence director of the Security Bureau in the 3 eastern provinces. Previously, he had sent people to obtain some military information about the Baiming army, through various means. Once he was even praised by the higher-ups. However, he had never fought with his old rival, the brocade gown guards. So many of the things he learned could not be used. Now that they had finally appeared, Ning Gang was very excited. Ning Gang, who had studied systematically, knew that it was oftentimes like this that he had to remain calm. When he thought of Director Yang San's calm choices in the face of various situations, he forcibly suppressed the urge to arrest them. The founder of the Security Bureau was, without a doubt, Yang Chendong. He had performed many similar tasks in his life, and was familiar with this aspect. He selected some selected training, improved it, and handed it over to Tiger's man. Later, Yang Chendong was promoted by the deputy director, and learned a lot from Yang Chendong. It could be said that he had completely inherited the mantle. As one of the students that Yang San was very satisfied with, Ning Gang naturally would not be too bad. He knew that the Brocade Gown Guards was a powerful organization. Once they appeared, they would not be alone. In order to complete the task, they often did not even form a team. Usually they would have a backup plan. His task was to find out all the members of the Brocade Gown Guards that had appeared. He absolutely could not leave a little bit of trouble behind. If they wanted to do this, they would have to rely on Dai Tongji. At this time, Dai Qing did not know that he was being watched. In the past, he had also come to the Liaodong region for missions, and secretly dealt with some disobedient officials. There had never been any problems. Now these people only had a change of master, but the place had not changed. What was there to be afraid of? Without the slightest precaution, Dai Qing only made a few necessary anti-tracking actions. After finding nothing unusual, he returned to his temporary residence and met the 6 brothers who stayed here. "Sir, you're back. Did everything go well?" Seeing Dai Qing return, a man about 25 or 26 years old with long eyebrows like willows and a jade-like body quickly came up to greet him. This person's surname was Yao and his given name was Shi. He was the person that Dai Qing valued the most. No matter where he went, Dai Qing would bring him along. However, very few people knew that although Dai Qing looked very masculine, he had different preferences from others. This Yao Shi was the person he liked the most. There were many things that he would not tell others, but he would never hide them from Yao Shi. Therefore, he was the only one among the 6 who knew the rough details of the mission. As soon as he saw Yao Shi, Dai Qing's heart skipped a beat. Since he was in a good mood, he naturally spoke more casually. "I've talked to him. There shouldn't be any problems. However, we still need to make another preparation. If he doesn't agree after 3 days, prepare to kidnap him. It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. This is the consequence of betraying the Baiming. How about this, Shi, or go inform the other team and have them prepare to act at any time." No matter what, Dai Qing was still a commander in the embroidered uniform guard. There were many people with status who knew him. Although he had disguised himself, it would be best if he did not appear in public. It would save him a lot of trouble. This time, if it wasn't to gain Yi Ligong's trust, he would not have personally come. However, he would never have thought that he had already been exposed. In his opinion, Yi Ligong would definitely not report this matter to the 5-star army for the safety of Song Quan's family. Even if he wanted to report it, it would not be so fast. Therefore, he should be very safe right now. The other operation team had 20 people. They were all highly skilled in martial arts. Once they used force, it would not be a problem for them to kill their way into the Yi residence. However, only Dai Qing and Yao Shi knew about the existence of this small team. It was not convenient for him to appear, so he could only send his confidant. "Be careful on the road. This is Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory." Although he did not think there would be any safety issues, Dai Qing still reminded Yao Shi. "Yes." Yao Shi agreed with a smile. He then went into the central room and put on a thick coat, wrapping his entire body in it. Seeing that there were no more problems, he left the courtyard under Dai Qing's watchful gaze and headed straight for another settlement. Yao Shi's level was far worse than Dai Qing's. He was only chosen because of his good looks. In terms of professional level, he was too far behind. After he was discharged from the hospital, he only nervously looked around. When he did not see anything special, he went to the location of the other team. Behind him, at least 3 secret agents of the Security Bureau were alternately following him. The sky finally darkened. In the inconspicuous courtyard where Ninggang lived, a large group of agents of the Security Bureau had already gathered. At this time, each of them had their chests puffed out, and their eyes shone brightly as they waited for the final order. After an afternoon of investigation, the group of embroidered uniform guards, a total of 27 people in 2 locations, safely fell into Ninggang's line of sight. After repeatedly confirming that the embroidered uniform guards did not have any backup plans, Ninggang decided to make his move. He also wanted to know the purpose of the embroidered uniform guards. Although through ordinary observation, this Yi Ligong was still very trustworthy. However, if something were to happen, it would be better to capture him and personally ask him. Teams 1, 2, 3, and 3 are responsible for capturing people. Teams 4, 5, and 6 are responsible for internal security. In the event of an accident, help at any time. Teams 7, 8, and 9 are responsible for the outermost security. Team 10 is responsible for secretly watching. In the event of an accident, immediately contact the 5-star army stationed in the city and seal off the 4 cities. In short, not a single embroidered uniform guard is allowed to escape. Ninggang looked at the 10 operation team captains standing in front of him with a trace of killing intent in his eyes as he spoke. A team of 10 people. A total of 100 operation team members. This was the armed force in Ninggang's hands. Other than that, he also had an intelligence team and a tracking team under him. In the event of a major incident, he also had the authority to mobilize the nearby troops at any time. Ninggang had mobilized all the operation team members, just to capture 27 embroidered uniform guards. This was how careful Ninggang was. He deeply remembered what Director Yang Chendong had said before. This was also what Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Chendong had taught them. As a qualified intelligence officer, succeeding 99 times was not something to be proud of. This was because as long as you failed once, all your previous efforts would be wasted. Therefore, every mission had to be completed with a 100% commitment. Even a lion would use all its strength to catch a rabbit. Each team received the mission and received the blueprints of the 2 courtyards from the intelligence team. After a thorough understanding and a reasonable plan of action, everyone set off at the designated time and went straight to the 2 targets. In the courtyard of the first target, Dai Qing was holding Yao Shi. The 2 hadn't started doing anything yet. They were resting on the side of the bed. Yao Shi tried his best to say nice things to please Dai Qing, but for some reason, the effect was not good today. His backer, who was also his direct superior, was always absent-minded. This was the fundamental quality of a special agent. They were born with an extremely strong sense of danger. For some reason after dinner, Dai Qing always felt his heartbeat become unstable, as if something big was going to happen. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure it out. He looked down at Yao Shi, who was still smiling at him in his arms. Dai Qing asked in an absolutely gentle tone. When you went out today you didn't notice anything else, right? No, what else could there be? No one here will recognize me. Yao Shi shook his head and said innocently. Yao Shi had not joined the embroidered uniform guards for long, and his ancestral home was in the south. In Liaodong no one knew him. He didn't even have an old friend, so there shouldn't be any problems. Could it be that he was thinking too much? How could Dai Qing know that the problem was him? Instead, he was the one who implicated Yao Shi? Dai Qing couldn't think of a reason, so he stopped thinking about it. Instead, when he looked at Yao Shi, his eyes revealed a fiery expression. Filthy words came out of his mouth. Little darling, the night is long. Just when he was about to do something, his ears suddenly moved. He seemed to hear a muffled sound in the courtyard. Who is it? As expected of a middle-level cadre in the embroidered uniform guards, he instantly exclaimed. Following this shout, the door was suddenly kicked open from the outside. Then 2 shadows pounced on him from the left and right. Aya! Yao Shi, who had already taken off his shirt, cried out in alarm when he saw this scene. Dai Qing, who was also half-naked, reacted immediately. He grabbed the pillow in his hand and threw it out with a whoosh. Taking advantage of the moment when the headrest was thrown away, his body leaped out like a spirit fox, rushing out of the room and landing in the courtyard. It was when he entered the courtyard that Dai Qing's expression froze. At this time, he noticed that there were 5 men in black standing in front of him. They were surrounding him in a semicircle. Who are you people? In his heart, he knew that he had encountered a thief. In front of these bandits who killed without batting an eye, his so-called embroidered uniform guard name might not be useful. So after saying this, he added, "If you are looking for money, I am willing to give you money. Since you are outside, please make things easy." Chapter 1279. Cut the crap. Capture him. I want him alive. The leader of the 5 people was Ning Gang. He was worried about the situation here, so he personally led the team here. At the same time, this was his first time dealing with the Imperial Secret Service, so he wanted to test the other party's strength. When the 4 team members beside him heard the supervisor's words, they rushed forward without another word. However, in order to capture him alive, they abandoned their weapons and rushed forward with their bare hands. What a good Dai Qing. Facing the 4 people rushing at him with a half-naked body, he was fearless. His fist was like the wind as he met them head-on. With a dull thud, the operation team member staggered back 3 steps, revealing an opening. With one punch, he forced an operation team member to retreat. However, Dai Qing's expression also froze. Although he did not use his full strength in that punch, he still used 70% of it. He originally thought that he would be able to send the person flying, but he only retreated 3 steps. It seemed that the other party did not come with good intentions, and was not weak. In the blink of an eye, the other 3 team members rushed forward together. For a moment, punches and kicks rained down on Dai Qing's body like a storm. Dai Qing, who protected his head with both hands and his key parts, took several fierce punches. Taking advantage of the opponent's first wave of attacks, before the second wave of attacks came, his body suddenly rushed in one direction. With a mountain lean, he knocked one of the operation team members to the ground. Then with a long leg sweep, he knocked another team member to the ground. After that, he extended his free hands and smashed towards the last team member. This series of reactions happened in the blink of an eye. The remaining operation team member kept retreating. His hands kept moving in front of him to protect himself, and at the same time, he wanted to dissipate the power of Dai Qing's attacks. After 3 consecutive punches, he still did not knock the opponent down. Dai Qing was anxious. He did not know how many tricks the opponent had. He could not delay and had to end the battle quickly. At that moment, he stopped abruptly. Then he raised his right leg and kicked the side of the team member's head with great force. Fortunately, the team member was somewhat prepared and protected his head. However, the powerful force still made him retreat continuously. Bang! Dai Qing, who had just finished his kick and was about to rush out, was suddenly knocked down to the ground by a long leg sweep. It was Ning Gang, who had not made a move until now, who had finally made his move. This kick was extremely fast. Dai Qing was unable to react in time, and suffered a loss. However, his skills were extraordinary after all, and he had experienced countless life and death battles. Therefore, the moment he fell to the ground, he took the opportunity to roll like a donkey, then flipped over and quickly stood up. Dai Qing had just steadied himself when another fist came crashing down. Out of instinct, Dai Qing countered with a punch. Then with a muffled bang, a great pain came from his fist. He couldn't help but take 4 steps back before he could stand firm. Needless to say, the one who attacked was Ning Gang. Since his first attack had failed, he would throw another punch. What he wanted was to seize the absolute initiative. After launching a kick and a punch, Ning Gang had already entered the zone. His body was as light as a swallow as he leaped up and launched a chain of 3 kicks at Dai Qing, who was still retreating. Tong tong tong. There were several fierce attacks. When Dai Qing felt that both his arms were in so much pain that he couldn't even lift them up, he suddenly felt a pain in his legs. It was still a long leg sweeping attack. Once again he was hit and fell to the ground. After falling to the ground twice in a row, Dai Qing's body was no longer as nimble as before. It was impossible for him to stand up in a short time. Taking advantage of this time, the 4 action team members who were repelled by him before pounced on Dai Qing, who was on the ground, like fierce tigers. Soon his limbs were pressed firmly and he could no longer move. At this time, the other 2 action team members in the bedroom had already escorted Yao Shi, who was also naked, out. Looking at the performance of the 2 men, Ning Gang, who was still calm and agile just now, couldn't help but stare blankly. Then he shook his head. At this moment, he already knew what had happened. He couldn't help but feel nauseous. The arrest operation was very smooth. Under the surprise attack, the action team of the Security Bureau suddenly made a move and ended everything in just 2 hours. 13 of the 27 embroidered uniform guards were killed on the spot. 7 were seriously injured, and the other 7 were captured. In the dungeon of the Security Bureau's branch in the 3 eastern provinces, the interrogation had already begun. As the protagonist, Dai Qing was locked up alone in a room. At this time his eyes were dull. Even now he still couldn't figure out what the problem was. He didn't suspect Yi Ligong. He had already done his research. He was a man of honor and would never betray him and put Song Quan's family in danger. About an hour passed and finally, there was a sound outside the prison door. Ning Gang and the others appeared in front of him. The 5 captured embroidered uniform guards were tortured, and all of them spoke. However, they didn't know what this person wanted to do. They only knew that it was to complete a secret mission. As for the specific details, they didn't know at all. Therefore, even though they wanted to speak and even talked about many secrets of the embroidered uniform guards, none of them were related to this operation. The final mission still fell on Dai Qing's head. As soon as Ning Gang appeared, Dai Qing raised his head and looked at him with the help of the candlelight. Then, he let out a snort and turned his head to the side. He knew very well that the people outside didn't know about the mission at all. Even Yao Shi had only informed the other party that they were going to take action. They only knew about the general mission, and it didn't matter. Seeing Dai Qing's uncooperative behavior, Ning Gang wasn't anxious. On the contrary, he looked at him with interest. Then he chuckled and said, "You don't want to talk, right? It's fine. I hope you can hold on. If you want to kill me, then kill me. I'll still be a good man after 18 years. At this moment, Dai Qing showed a fearless expression. Oh, still a good man after 18 years? Not bad. But I don't know if you can hold on until then to bring him here. Ning Gang wasn't surprised. If the other party spoke after a simple inquiry, it could only mean that there was no one else in the embroidered uniform guards that could be used. After this shout, the bare-chested Yao Shi was quickly brought over. Then he was tied to a wooden pillar at the side. When this scene fell into Dai Qing's eyes, a trace of nervousness flashed across his face. And all of this was seen by Ning Gang. This was his trump card. He had already guessed before. Then he found out from the mouths of the other embroidered uniform guards that Dai Qing and Yao Shi were indeed doing something shameful. He wasn't afraid of the enemy being stubborn. He was only afraid that he couldn't find the enemy's weakness. As long as he found it, it would be time to pry open the enemy's mouth. Yao Shi was tied to the wooden frame. Ning Gang casually sat on a chair. First, he inadvertently glanced at Dai Qing and found that he was looking at Yao Shi with red eyes. Immediately, the corner of his mouth curled up and said, "What are you waiting for? Let's start the torture." No. 2 consecutive voices came from different mouths. It was Dai Qing and Yao Shi. Yao Shi was afraid, and Dai Qing was worried. Ning Gang wasn't surprised at all by these 2 people's reactions. He looked at Yao Shi again and said, "You're so delicate. We really don't want to torture you, but there's no other way. Someone has to speak. Why are you here? Otherwise, I won't be able to report back. Okay, let's not talk nonsense. Let's start the torture." No. Yao Shi, who was afraid of being tortured, immediately shouted loudly. Then he looked at Dai Qing and said, "Save me, save me. Didn't you say that you love me very much and are willing to give up everything for me?" If these words were said by a woman to a man, everyone would be able to accept it. After all, love between a man and a woman was a very normal thing. But when it came from a man talking to another man, no matter how handsome the man was, it made people feel a sense of disgust. At this moment, not to mention Ningang, even the other people participating in the interrogation hurriedly looked to the side. Obviously, they couldn't accept the reality in front of them. However, at this moment, Daiqing didn't feel uncomfortable at all. On the contrary, he looked at Yaoshi affectionately with a look of struggle in his eyes. Next, Yaoshi shouted loudly, but Daiqing didn't speak. He just looked conflicted and reluctant. It's time to add fuel to the fire. Ningang thought so in his heart. Then, he said to the torture staff, "What are you waiting for? Since there are people who don't care, let's start the torture." "Yes," a burly man agreed. Then he raised his right hand and twisted the whip in his hand. When he saw that the whip was about to fall, Daiqing, who had been silent, couldn't help but shout, "Don't hit, I'll talk. Hit the snake where it hurts." However, no one would have thought that Daiqing's weakness was actually a man. For the sake of Yaoshi, he finally lowered his head. Ningang also stood up from his chair and said with satisfaction, "That's right. Well, tell me about your mission here." Daiqing, who had been wronged, naturally cooperated fully. He told the whole story of how he received the order from eunuch Gao Rang to persuade Yi Ligong to rebel. It turned out that what happened in Liaodu had made the acting emperor very angry. If they had only lost to the 5-star army in the war, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, who would only win and not lose in a war? However, he was angry about the performance of the officials, especially the generals, who were originally from New Ergon. Didn't they say that martial artists valued righteousness and scholars despised each other? But why did so many generals and commanders choose to surrender? He couldn't figure it out. At the same time, he decided to punish these people. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone follow suit in the future? Chapter 1280. Not long after, Shirwanshan's tens of thousands of soldiers surrendered to the 5-star army, Daizong became even more determined. Under the instigation of eunuch Jining, this task fell into the hands of the head of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Gao Rang. Don't think that the group of eunuchs would be united. On the contrary, they fought fiercely more than anyone else. Perhaps it was because they were missing some parts of their bodies, but they were especially fierce when they fought. They would often kill their opponents as soon as they made a move. After Gao Rang received this task, he immediately began to plan everything. He needed to report to the emperor. Otherwise, if the emperor questioned him, Jining would add fuel to the fire, and he would not have a good ending. Just like that, after a series of investigations, the final target was Yi Ligong, who valued friendship the most. Although he wanted to make a move on Shirwanshan, who had more power, he had already taken away his family and his brother's family. Even the eunuch who was in charge of supervising them was taken away. Helpless, he could only find General Yi Ligong, who was second only to them. Although Yi Ligong did not have a family and his parents were no longer alive, based on the results of Gao Rang's investigation, he valued friendship. He especially treated his superior, Song Quan, like his own brother. Although Song Quan was dead, his family was in Baiming's capital, so there was no need to fear that he would not submit. Thus, Gao Rang had people take Song Quan's family into custody, and then sent one of his trusted aides, Daiqing, to complete the task. In his view, with hostages in hand, Yi Ligong would not dare to act rashly. As long as he could convince him to take back the military power of the 3 eastern provinces, Baiming would not only be able to take back the area north of Liaodong, but also cut off the supply route of the 5-star army. No matter how he looked at it, this was a great achievement. Daiqing came. He also believed that with hostages in hand, Yi Ligong would not dare to act rashly. Thus he also brought his favorite, Yaoshi, along with him. He never thought that he would have a bad start and attract the attention of the Security Bureau of the 5-star army. Now that he had fallen into their hands, he did not know whether he would live or die. After confessing everything, Daiqing was like a defeated rooster. He looked at Ningang and said, "I've said what I should say. You can kill me, but please let Yaoshi go." "Thank you." Ningang had a guess about what had happened, and now it seemed that he was right. However, he did not intend to let Dai Qing go, nor did he intend to kill him. If the matter was not resolved, Gao Rang would inevitably send other brocade guards to solve his problem. This time, it was due to the other party's carelessness that he was easily discovered. But what about the next time? What about the next time? He couldn't be so lucky every time, right? In order to solve this problem once and for all, there was only one way, which was to rescue Song Quan's family and send them to General Yi Ligong. This was the perfect ending. In order to accomplish all of this, it ultimately fell on Dai Qing's shoulders. In the capital of Baiming, the Security Bureau also had secret armed forces, and there were spies in some key departments. It was not difficult to rescue a few people, but the difficult part was where Song Quan's family was. In the huge capital, there were more than 1 million people. If there were no clues, it would be quite difficult to find them. If they were not careful, they might alert the enemy and mess things up. In order to find out where the people were being held, they could only start from Dai Qing. Dai Tongji, do you know where Song Quan's family is being held? Ning Gang, who wanted to find out all of this, asked. Don't call me Tongji. Just call me by my name. I'm now a prisoner. As for where they are being held, I don't know. I just received a mission to inform General Yi Ligong. Dai Qing shook his head and said all of this as expected. Ning Gang did not suspect that Dai Qing was lying. After all, he had said what he should, and there was nothing to hide. In other words, if he wanted to know where Song Quan's family was being held, he had to think of another way. However, Ning Gang did not want to go through so much trouble. He stared at Dai Qing and said, If I let you go, do you have the confidence to find where Song Quan's family is being held when you return to the capital? Hearing that he could be released, Dai Qing's heart skipped a beat. However, when he thought about how he had answered so many questions, even if he escaped now, Eunuch Gao Rang and the embroidered uniform guards would not spare him. Their family rules were very strict. I don't have confidence. The capital is too big. Finding a few people, especially a few people who are deliberately hiding, is harder than ascending to the heavens. Then what if this is General Ye's intention? Ning Gang continued to ask. General Ye's intention? Dai Qing said with some confusion. Yes, it's General Ye's intention. If General Yi wants to see Song Quan's family first to make sure they are fine, then he will talk to you about surrendering. With such an excuse, do you have the confidence to see Song Quan's family? Ning Gang's brain worked quickly, and he quickly thought of a way to solve the problem and a possibility. Dai Qing thought about these words and imagined the possibilities, but in the end he shook his head and said, I'm afraid it's still very difficult. I may be able to see one person, but I won't see everyone. Moreover, Eunuch Gao is suspicious by nature. He won't let me see the Song family's hiding place casually. Speaking of which, I'm just one of his trusted aides, not his confidant. Dai Qing's meaning was very obvious. That was Gao Rang still couldn't fully trust him. He wouldn't reveal all his cards in such a matter. Ning Gang did not expect this, but it was normal. If he really was a trusted subordinate, he wouldn't have sent Dai Qing to handle such a dangerous matter. After thinking it through, he was not discouraged. Instead, he continued to ask, based on your understanding of Gao Rang, which confidant might know where Song Quan's family is being held? After thinking for a while, Dai Qing listed 3 names and said, the 3 of them are Eunuch Gao's absolute confidants. He can't do this kind of thing himself. He will only give it to one of them. As for who it will be, I can't say for sure. That's enough. Hearing that he could narrow down the target to 3 people, Ning Gang's face lit up. Originally, Yang Chendong had asked about the placement of Song Quan's family. However, Baiming's capital was not within Yang Xie's sphere of influence. It was not possible to find out among millions of people with great fanfare, so this matter had been suppressed. But now that there was a clue, Ning Gang would not give up. As long as he kept a close eye on these 3 people, he would not have to worry about not being able to find them. The only way to solve this problem was to bring all of Song Quan's family members to Yi Ligong's side. A rough plan quickly formed in Ning Gang's mind. When he looked at Dai Qing, he said bluntly, Dai Qing, your chance to perform a meritorious deed has come. As long as you follow my arrangements, I will not only guarantee your safety when you return to the capital, but you will also receive a reward when you complete the mission. When the time comes, you and Yaoshi can go wherever you want. Haha, the world is vast, but all is imperial land. Hearing this, Daiqing shook his head. He thought that this was completely bewitching words. But before he could refuse, Ninggang interrupted. Wrong. In the world, Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory is not smaller than Baiming's. In fact, it is even larger than Baiming's territory. As long as you complete this mission, I can immediately give you and Yaoshi an identity card that belongs to Yangxie. When the time comes, as long as you are in Yangxie's territory, you can go wherever you want. At that time, you can live a carefree and unfettered life with a concealed identity. Wouldn't that be better? Of course, if you are still willing to work for Bugnam of Gojoseon, I am also willing to recommend you. Daiqing, who originally did not have much hope and only wanted to use everything he had in exchange for Yaoshi's safety, suddenly trembled when he heard these words. That's right. Right now, the world was not just Baiming's territory. There was also Nanming and Yangxie. The territory that Yangxie had conquered over the years was simply unimaginable. There were so many places that he could choose to live in. When the time came, no matter how powerful the embroidered uniform guard was, it would not be easy for them to find him. As for working for Yangxie, Daiqing did not have such thoughts. Ever since the day he joined the embroidered uniform guard, he thought that he would never be able to leave. Over the years, he had killed countless people and was tired of this kind of life. Now that he had a new beginning, how could he return to this kind of life? Okay, I only hope that after this matter is completed, you can let me and Yaoshi leave and let us go to a new place to start anew. Daiqing did not dare to hope for a reward. As long as he could keep his life, he was already very satisfied. Although he did not manage to persuade Daiqing to join the security bureau, Ninggang was not disappointed. As Yangxie grew stronger and his territory became wider and wider, there would be plenty of talents in the future. At that time, it would not be you who begged others to join, but others who begged you to join. Finally, Daiqing was persuaded. But for the sake of safety, Yaoshi did not leave with him this time. Only he was allowed to leave the Jianzhou left guard. Later, after the secret agents of the Security Bureau in Baiming and Jingming received the telegram, they kept an eye on Gao Rang's 3 confidants and made preparations. In the end, they found all of Song Quan's family members. What happened next was much simpler. The people were suddenly taken away by the Security Bureau. Then they left the capital through a secret channel and went to Shur City. In April next year, they arrived at the Jianzhou left guard. When they suddenly appeared in the Yi mansion, Yi Ligong was completely shocked. Originally, he had been waiting for Daiqing to show up again. He had already thought that as long as Daiqing dared to appear again, he would take him down and send him to the governor, Lu Ji, to prove his loyalty to Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 5-star army. Next, he would commit suicide to thank Song Quan for taking care of him. But he did not expect that after waiting for so long, he would get such a result. Chapter 1281. The person was sent over, and Yi Ligong had to be interrogated according to the law. After all, he didn't report Daiqing's appearance to Governor Lu Ji and the relevant departments, who knew what he was thinking. However, after the investigation, Yi Ligong's bodyguards found out that the general had ordered that the moment Baiming's brocade guard appeared, it would be time to arrest them. This proved his loyalty. After reporting to Yang Chendong, Yi Ligong was released without charge and returned to his position as the general of the eastern 3 provinces. As for Daiqing, he completed his mission very well, and brought over a member of the Song family. Ninggang also fulfilled his promise. Not only did he release Yaoshi, but he also gave them identification documents that could be used in Yangxie's territory. He also gave them 10,000 taels of silver for their living expenses. This was enough for them to live a carefree life. Daiqing was so touched that he knelt down to thank him. He also said that he would tell his brothers about what had happened to him through various channels. In the brocade guard, everyone knew that as long as they came, they would be part of the brocade guard in life and in death. It was impossible for them to leave. However, with him as an example, those who wanted to leave could first come to Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory, and then leave. This was equivalent to giving the brocade guard, especially those who were no longer part of the brocade guard, a new way out. Because of this, who knew how many brocade guard left and how many secrets they took with them? Some of these people directly joined the security bureau to work for Yang Chendong, while others joined the army and started anew. There were also some who went to other places to become farmers or merchants. However, this matter had a great impact on the brocade guard. Not only did it not succeed, but it also caused their own troops to be disloyal. Gao Reng was often punished by the acting guardian emperor. This matter was enough to change the entire brocade guard, but it wasn't important in front of Yang Chendong. It was already the 3rd month, and the snow had begun to melt. Although the weather was still fluctuating, and occasionally there would be light snow or sleet, it was no longer a hindrance to the road. Yang Chendong was also going to lead the 5-star army to attack and occupy the Lili area. Over the past few months, hundreds of grain piles had been built in Turpan. They were all filled with rations to ensure that the army had enough for war. Many of the warehouses in the palace were also filled with boxes of gold, silver, and paper money. It had been 2 years since the banknotes were issued. This paper, called Han banknote, had a very obvious golden dragon printed on it, making it unforgettable. In Yang Xie's sphere of influence, these silver coins had gradually replaced gold ingots, silver ingots, and copper coins. After all, these things would be worn out if used frequently, but Han coins would not. As long as there was no intentional damage or tearing, it would not be wasted. Especially when there were different denominations in the banknotes. The small ones were 1 fun, 2 fun, and 5 fun, while the large ones were 100, 50, and 20 yuan. They were light and easy to carry, and were much more convenient than silver. With the Yang family bank as a guarantor, one could bring Han coins to any bank to exchange for gold and silver. At the same time, one could exchange gold and silver for Han coins. It was extremely convenient. If it was a large transaction, the Yang family bank could also release 100,000 yuan worth of banknotes. In this way, it was convenient for the commoners, and at the same time, it gradually replaced gold, silver, and copper coins, relieving the pressure on Yang Xie's finances. Even though Yang Xie was using war to support war, due to the continuous war, the pressure on his finances was still huge. If it wasn't for the fact that there were many new products that were exported, earning large amounts of money, he would not have been able to support himself until now. Furthermore, the circulation of Han banknotes had reduced the risks that might arise. Currently, all the banks in the Yang family were filled with gold and silver, greatly increasing the commoners' confidence in Han coins. With money and rations, this war was much easier to fight. Furthermore, Yang Chendong had the strongest weapons in the world, as well as the most resolute army. It was only a matter of time before they swept through all 4 directions. Just like now, the 5-star army seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They were just waiting for Wu Nanking's order to launch a large-scale attack, besieging the city and capturing the stronghold to gain military merits. In comparison, the Ili Belly, Turpan, and Yarkyang tribes were having a much harder time. The commoners knew that war was coming, and no one knew what would happen. In a short period of time, the price of food soared, especially the price of food, which the commoners relied on for survival. In the past, 1 tael of silver could buy 2 dan of rice, and 1 dan was 94. 4 kilograms. 1 tael of silver could buy 188. 8 kilograms of rice. But now 1 tael of silver could only buy 10 kilograms of rice. The price of food remained high, and at the beginning of spring, there were already signs of people starving to death. The flow of people fleeing also increased. In this regard, the kings of the 3 kingdoms could only watch, because they didn't know how long this war would last. They absolutely couldn't take out the food in their storehouses. Otherwise, how could the army win the war without food? What was worse was that the Kazakh and Aries dynasties' armies were about to enter. According to the previous agreement, the 3 kingdoms would be responsible for their food supplies. For a moment, the 3 kings were worried sick. The commoners were so hungry that they could not even eat, nor could they afford to buy food. Where would they find the strength to grow food? This was like a vicious cycle. Before the war even started, there were already internal problems, and the economic order was seriously threatened. It was said that war was a matter of fighting for money. Before the war even started, the five-star army had already won. When the news of the three kingdoms reached the ears of Yang Qindong in Turpan, he keenly felt that this was a great opportunity. He immediately sent a telegram to the logistics headquarters, Yangtze, and asked him to gather more food and send it to Turpan. At the same time, he ordered the gates to be open to receive the refugees from all directions. He also said that if the commoners had money, they could use the previous price to buy food. If they did not have money, as long as they came here, they would not be allowed to starve to death. If they were willing to move to other places, they would be given a pass. After gathering enough people, they could be sent to the rear and be given food, money, and land. With this move, the south and west gates of Turpan were quickly filled with commoners from all over. They were all people living at the bottom of the food chain, and did not have much savings. When the harvest was good, they could eat more, but when the harvest was bad, their food would be worse. People like these only wanted to survive. As for beliefs and dignity, who would care if they could not even eat? The sudden situation also caught Yang Qindong off guard. Originally, he thought that even if he opened the city gate and spread the food, he might not be able to recruit many people. However, when he saw the number of people increasing by thousands or even tens of thousands every day, and this trend was getting stronger and stronger, he couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "Immediately transfer 2 divisions from the new Second Army to escort the food and be responsible for the safety of the people along the way. Quickly send these people to the rear." This sudden development caught Yang Qindong off guard, but the military operations that were supposed to be carried out did not stop. For example, the new army, the new Fifth Army, and the First Army of the foreign races still set off on time. Before the 3 commanders left the city, Yang Qindong held a short meeting and gave them a clear request. Their task was not to occupy as many cities as possible, but to attack the enemy's military strength as much as possible. Don't even think about occupying the cities. That's not something you should do. Unless there's a shortage of food, you can open the warehouses to get food. At other times, you can even abandon the captives and military equipment. In short, there's only one thing: kill the enemy. The more you kill, the better. After the 3 commanders completely understood Yang Qindong's meaning, they immediately expressed that they would kill as many enemies as possible to pave the way for the Central Army. The 3 commanders quickly left after giving a standard military salute to Yang Qindong. And then more than 100,000 troops poured out of the city. Naturally, the people of the 3 kingdoms were worried when they heard the news, especially King Hardenbarter. After hearing the news, his face was full of worry, and there was no light in it. Unlike the other 2 kingdoms, King Hardenbarter lost his capital, and fled all the way until he lost his strength. But because of the bumpy road, coupled with the lack of strength in the front line, and the repeated defeats, when the news came, the imprisoned King Shiza fell ill and finally died 10 days ago. Before King Shiza died, he scolded his son Hardenbarter for being unfilial, which made him very angry. What he did was for the good of Turpan, but he didn't expect the 5-star army to be so strong. They didn't retreat in the face of the 5-kingdom alliance, and they even won consecutive battles. In the end, the famous Yeshen had no choice but to flee. Now that they were finally enlightened, and it was time for war, the 5-star army's first target seemed to be him. There was nothing he could do about it, who told Kalibi to be the closest to Turpan. After knowing that the 5-star army first sent out more than 100,000 troops, and that one of the new army's targets was Kalibi, Hardenbarter called General Daichin to discuss the defense. The Kazakh and Aries dynasty's armies haven't arrived yet, and Yeshen and Urcheong have a large area to defend. What should we do now? After calling Daichin, Hardenbarter immediately asked for a plan, and at the same time, he showed an expectant expression. If it was before, he wouldn't have to worry about this at all, and would just wait for the other party to report. But after a few battles, Turpan didn't win a single time, and even General Daichin lost a battle. As a general who lost his capital, Hardenbarter didn't have much confidence in them. Chapter 1282. Now that Tulyufan had suffered consecutive defeats, their military strength was not as good as before. Although they recruited another 50,000 soldiers, Their military strength had reached 180,000, but there were too many places to defend. Facing the 5-star army, they were unable to do anything. More importantly, the civilians of Tulyafin were too close to Tulyafin city. Naturally, they were the majority of the civilians that escaped. Not only that, there were also a lot of retired soldiers that escaped. They mixed in with the civilians and entered Tulyafin city. Don't think that they mixed in just to find the base of the 5-star army. They really did surrender. Their families didn't have food to eat, their parents were old, their children were young, their wives were weak. They all needed the head of the family as a man to take care of them. These people chose to stand out to protect their families and join the 5-star army with their families. People like these who brought their families with them wouldn't go against the 5-star army, much less cause any trouble. Moreover, this situation was becoming more and more intense. The battle had yet to begin, but the army had already lost close to 5,000 soldiers. One could imagine, with their current state, how could they fight with the 5-star army? How could they fight with the enemy? They didn't have enough soldiers and their battle strength was even lower. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. At this moment, General Daichin didn't know how to deal with this. At this moment, he really wanted to ask the king to open the granary and release the grain. However, he knew that if he really did that, not only would the civilians of Tulyafin, even the civilians of Ili and Yirkiang would come. It would also attract some unscrupulous merchants who would hoard grain at a high price. If that happened, then it would be a huge problem. Daichin thought for a long time, but couldn't think of a solution. Facing the king's question, he could only lower his head and remain silent. Harden Bartle waited for a long while, and still didn't get any reply. He couldn't help but ask, "General Daichin, I'm asking you something. Can you hear me?" "Yes, Your Majesty, I hear you. The 5-star army is coming at us ferociously. Our reinforcements won't be able to reach here in a short amount of time. The only thing we can do now is to place our main forces outside the city and defend first. Using our advantage in numbers and terrain, we can still fight." Helpless, Daichin could only suggest a defensive strategy. He knew that if they kept defending, they would definitely lose. However, if they took the initiative to fight, they might be surrounded and split up. If that really happened, Turpan would have no trump cards left. Even if they could chase away the 5-star army one day, they wouldn't have the strength to bargain with their allies. Harden Barter quickly understood what Daichin meant. He couldn't help but frown. "You mean that we should let the 5-star army walk past our city and wreak havoc everywhere? But do you know that if we do that, the entire Turpan will be engulfed in the flames of war, and we will have no way out. Once the city is lost, there will be no place for us to stay." Daichin obviously understood this logic, but at this moment, he really didn't have any better ideas. If they split up their forces to fight, they would probably lose even faster. As for whether or not this would cause them to lose the nearby cities and large amounts of land, it wasn't a problem that he needed to consider right now. "Let's solve this problem first. Your Majesty, I know your worries, but as long as Your Majesty is still here, the army is still here, and the lost land can be taken back. Furthermore, from what I see, if we gather our forces outside the city, the 5-star army might turn around and leave. After all, their numbers aren't as good as ours, so attacking the city won't benefit them. That way, as long as they leave, they might enter the lands of other allies. If that happens, some people won't be able to stand by and do nothing." Daichin had done a serious analysis before. Right now, there were 150,000 soldiers gathered outside the city, and their numbers were above the 5-star armies. If they attacked this place, both sides would suffer losses, and this wasn't the result that the 5-star army wanted. It was very likely that they would give up on this place and go to other places, such as Yilabali and Yarkiang. In that case, the two allied countries would not be able to sit on the sidelines even if they wanted to. Once they joined in, the pressure on Tulyafin would be greatly reduced. When Harden Barter heard these words, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He finally understood his general's thoughts. This was also what he wanted. A month ago, before the ice and snow had melted, he had contacted the kings of Yilabali and Yarkiang, hoping that they would send reinforcements. This was because from various signs, It was very likely that the five-star army's first target would be his Turpan kingdom. What he meant was that he didn't receive any response from them, as if they didn't hear his suggestion at all. It was clear that the two countries wanted to see them fight the five-star army first, and then find a chance to reap the benefits. This was the so-called alliance. Because of the existence of their own interests, it was impossible for them to truly be united. Once there was a conflict of interests, it was very likely that they would turn against each other. Since they weren't benevolent, then they shouldn't blame him for being unrighteous. Although Daichin's suggestion was to sacrifice a large portion of Turpan's cities, he would be able to preserve his own military strength and quickly drag the other two countries into the war to reduce the pressure on him. Why not? The most important question now was whether or not the five-star army would attack Kalabali city. He asked Daichin this question again. Are you sure that the five-star army will go around us? They should. Even though this was the result of many analyses, who could be sure about the changes on the battlefield? Daichin didn't dare to make any guarantees, so he added, Your Majesty, we can act like we are going to fight to the death and give the five-star army some pressure. This way they shouldn't attack us. Plus, if they really want to attack Kalabali city, then we can hold on for a while. When the time comes, we will have enough time to send Your Majesty away. Daichin's meaning was very clear. No matter what, Hardenbarter's life could be saved. The only difference was that one result was that they would still be very strong, and the other result was that they would become a fugitive government that needed to rely on others. Okay, then let's give it a try. Immediately transfer the troops from the nearby cities and leave some money and food in the other cities to lure the five-star army. Hardenbarter was very decisive. He actually didn't have any other choice. Either he immediately moved the army and gave up on Kalabali city. This way, even if he continued to escape, he would still be caught by the five-star army. The losses wouldn't be small. Since that was the case, why not take a gamble? Daichin was very supportive of Hardenbarter's decision. When he heard that the king wanted the other cities to leave some food for the five-star army, he couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration. With this bait, the chances of the five-star army not attacking Kalabali city would increase. Under the king's orders, the troops from the nearby cities started to move towards Kalabali city. The Turpan kingdom only had 180,000 troops. Other than the 30,000 troops that were too scattered and couldn't gather due to the distance, the other 150,000 troops were all gathered in and outside Kalabali city. The military tents stretched for 10 miles, as if they were ready for a decisive battle once the five-star army arrived. The ones that came from the middle were the new army. After General Su he heard the information from the scouts, mainly from the intelligence department, he immediately made the decision to go around Kalabali city and attack the smaller cities with weaker defenses. Before they came, Yang Chendong had said that this time, they weren't going to take over the city or see who took over the most territory. What they wanted was to destroy the enemy's strength. Since that was the case, Suhi wouldn't be stupid enough to fight with the Turpan kingdom's main force. Plus, he really didn't care about a single Kalabali city. Suhi's new army was the closest five-star army to Kalabali city. Even he suddenly took a detour, so the five-star army and the first army of the other races definitely wouldn't have any ideas about this place. When the news reached Hardenbarter and Daichin's ears, they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. King Hardenbarter's face finally showed a trace of relief as he said, They really took a detour. Haha, let the other people have a headache from now on. Yes, Your Majesty. Now that we've prepared ahead of time, we've stored large amounts of food in Kalabali city. It won't be a problem for us to defend for 2 to 3 years. By then, the battle will have ended. At that time, with your 150,000 troops, you might become the strongest force here. Daichin also let out a sigh of relief. As the general, the pressure on him was greater than anyone else. Luckily, the result was good. The five-star army really did take a detour. Naturally, the burden on his body was also reduced by a bit. Oh, you're saying that we still have a chance? Hardenbarter, who originally thought that they were just hiding for a while, suddenly thought of a possibility. If the result was as Daichin predicted, when the five-star army and his allies were almost done fighting, Wouldn't he be able to reap the greatest benefits by leading his 150,000 troops? Thinking about how the Turpan kingdom could use this opportunity to increase their strength and truly unify this place, Hardenbarter couldn't help but laugh out loud. Wasn't this what he had been searching for? Perhaps it would truly be realized in his own hands. The new army went around Kalabali city and came to the hinterland of the Turpan kingdom. Then they attacked the city and took over the stronghold. No one could stop them. Some of the smaller cities had already opened their gates. The civilians had all run away. The Turpan army in the city had also all run away. It didn't take much effort at all. Chapter 1283. Regarding this, Commander He was extremely clear-headed. Even though he was facing an empty city, he still sent people to investigate, and only moved in after confirming that it was safe. After a night of rest, he did not leave a single soldier in the city the next morning. Instead, he continued to lead the army forward. He remembered Yang Qindong's order, which was to destroy the enemy's strength and not to snatch control of the city. Along the way, the advance of the 1st Cavalry had been incredibly fast. Along the way, they had encountered some resistance from the Turfan army, but most of them were only a few hundred to 1,000 men. In front of the powerful 1st Cavalry, which numbered over 30,000, a single regiment could easily crush them in a single charge, wiping them out in just a few rounds. The new army progressed at an extremely fast pace, and good news was reported through the radio from time to time. In comparison, the progress of the new 5 armies could be said to be extremely fast. This was because they had originally chosen the east route. After setting off from Turpan, they also went around Chali and headed straight for Lop Nur. After taking down the nearby Ruoqiang County, their journey was extremely smooth. After some rest, they headed straight for Yirkiang's tribe. Next, it was time for them to show off their strength. In comparison, the 1st Army of the Outsiders was not so lucky. Under the lead of Commander Bai Shuang, they headed straight for Heavenly Mountain. Once they crossed the mountain, it would be equivalent to entering the hinterland of Ili and fighting with them. Luckily, they were prepared beforehand and had already scouted out their route. They found a relatively flat land, so crossing Heavenly Mountain was only a matter of time. Seeing that they were about to succeed and were about to face the city, Bai Shuang stopped the army and summoned the 4 division commanders to his tent. Inside the tent, Bai Shuang was wearing a purple cape. His young and handsome face had a maturity and steadiness that did not belong to his age. His clear eyes were staring at the sand table gathered by the intelligence department in front of him, thinking about something. Commander Tu Hai and the other division commanders walked into the tent. After seeing Bai Shuang, they could not help but call out. Bai Shuang had replaced Su Kuda as the commander of the 1st Army of the Outsiders. For a regiment commander to be promoted to the position of commander, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was being promoted beyond his rank. But who asked his teacher to be Yang Qindong and Bugnam of Gojoseon? Even though Tu Hai and the others did not agree in their hearts, they still had to put on a very respectful appearance on the surface. Bai Shuang could more or less guess the thoughts of the 4 teachers. However, he didn't mind because he believed that he could conquer them with his own abilities. This was also the idea that his teacher, Yang Qindong, had given him. During the new year, when Bai Shuang went to visit Yang Qindong, she had received some pointers. Seniority in the army was naturally not something that could be ignored, but ability was more important. According to what Yang Qindong had said, as long as he displayed enough strength, Tu Hai and the others would not listen to him. Of course, if they really dared to disobey military orders, they could deal with them according to military rules. On this point, Yang Qindong had fully delegated the authority to Bai Shuang. With Yang Qindong's support behind him, what did Bai Shuang have to fear? He immediately promised that he would use practical actions to prove himself, and at the same time he would not lose face for his teacher. Next, it was time to fight the first battle. How to make the 4 teachers truly submit to him. This battle was naturally very crucial. You've all come. Very good. Take a look at the sand table in front of you. In half a day, we will be able to cross the Heavenly Mountain. Next, we will be entering the territory of Ili. The first town in front of us is the city department of Little Yule. The intelligence personnel have already sent news that there are 2,000 enemy soldiers here. Everyone, tell us, how should we attack and occupy that place? As Bai Shuang spoke, his gaze landed on Tu Hai and the other three. Only 2,000 enemy soldiers. The four teachers couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. Clearly, this amount of soldiers was nothing in their eyes. Especially the leader of the 301st Division, Tu Hai. As a veteran of countless battles, Tu Hai had already killed countless enemies. Only 2,000 people were nothing in his eyes. Therefore, he was the first to speak. Military leader, it's only 2,000 enemies. Leave this matter to our division. I guarantee that we will be able to take it down within 2 hours. Tu Hai's words were extremely confident. In reality, he also had the strength to do so. The other teachers originally wanted to ask for a battle, but since Tu Hai had already stood out, it was naturally not good for them to snatch the credit. But even though they did not say anything from their expressions, it was obvious that they were disdainful of this battle. 2 hours? Not bad. It is indeed very fast. After Bai Shuang heard Tu Hai's words, he nodded in approval. Hearing that Bai Shuang seemed to agree, Tu Hai laughed and immediately saluted. Military leader, I will go and make preparations. At this time tomorrow, I will guarantee that the army will be able to spend the night in Little Yule City. See. After speaking, Tu Hai was about to turn and leave the tent, but Bai Shuang's voice rang out. Teacher Tu, please wait. Tu Hai, who was stopped, revealed a displeased expression. However, before he could say anything, Bai Shuang and the others also asked. Division Master Tu, how many men are you going to bring to attack? Can you guarantee that the other party will all stay in the city? Can you guarantee that none of the civilians or soldiers will escape? Can you guarantee that the news of our army appearing here will not be leaked? Can you guarantee that the stored food in the city will be safe for our army to use? Can you guarantee that? A series of questions were thrown out. In this short period of time, Tu Hai's expression changed again and again. He really wanted to say that once the battle started, who knew what would happen? How could he guarantee this? Who could guarantee this? After a series of questions were thrown out, Tu Hai did not know how to answer. However, Bai Shuang did not intend to stop asking. Instead, he continued to ask, I wonder if Teacher Tu can give an answer to these questions. This I can't guarantee. Tu Hai opened his mouth and closed it. After closing it and opening it again, he finally said these words. Okay, then which of the other teachers can do it? Bai Shuang then looked at Luan Xiaojiang and the others with a serious expression. No. Luan Xiaojiang, Sensei Naganabu, and Kong Biao all shook their heads one by one. It was easy to take down a city, but it was too difficult to not leak any news. At this moment, Tu Hai had already recovered from his previous question. At this moment he finally said, Military leader, this is a bit too much. The situation of a battle is constantly changing. There is a saying in the art of war, there is no constant situation in war, and there is no constant situation in water. Who can guarantee that there will not be any problems? Wrong. Without waiting for Tu Hai to finish, Bai Shuang's stern gaze had already turned over. Changes in war do exist, but as long as the plan is good, it is very possible to control it within a certain range. Also, if you can't do it, it doesn't mean that others can't. I am willing to make a military pledge. I will personally go and control Little Yule City head. I guarantee that there will not be any problems. However, if there are any accidents, I am willing to resign from my current position and return to being a regiment commander. When the military pledge was made, the four teachers were so shocked that their jaws dropped. For a moment, they were all stunned and did not know what to say. Logically speaking, with Bai Shuang's current status, he could let his subordinates do things for him. Unless it was a matter of life and death for the First Army, he would not personally take action. This was also Yang Qindong's intention. High-ranking officers could not take risks, because if something happened, the losses would be too great. However, Bai Shuang actually took the initiative to volunteer. However, to be able to become a teacher, none of them were idiots. They quickly thought it through. This time, Bai Shuang was forcing himself. He was establishing his authority. Military commander, you can't. After thinking it through, Division 303's Division Commander Sensei Naganabu took the initiative to stand up, wanting to say something. He was different from other people. Although he led the First Army, it was an army made up of people from different races, different regions, and even different faiths. However, to be able to become a high-ranking officer, other than him, everyone else was Han. This made his status somewhat awkward. When he did some things, he naturally could not be as unscrupulous as other people. Now that Bai Shuang was about to take the risk, of course he had to speak up to stop him, and express his attitude. Sensei Naganabu was the first to speak up. Afterwards, Division 302's Division Commander Luan Xiaojiang and Division 304's Division Commander Kong Biao also spoke up to dissuade him. Whether they were sincere or just on the surface, at least they all knew that Bai Shuang's appointment as a military commander was personally ordered by Yang Chendong. That was set in stone and no one could stop him. And if something happened to Bai Shuang in front of them, as the commanders who held the military power, they would not be any better off. Out of the 4 commanders, 3 of them had expressed their opinions. Only Tu Hai stood there without saying anything. Instead, he looked at Bai Shuang up and down as if he had just met him. All right, this military commander has made up his mind. It cannot be changed. How about this? I will bring the direct military guards to Little Yule City Head. You all just need to stay at home and wait for the good news. Bai Shuang did not care if others looked at him or not. As the saying went, doing things beautifully was more convincing than saying more. Orders, everyone is to rest where they are. The direct military guards will follow me. Bai Shuang gave the order as a military commander. At this moment, even if the 4 commanders wanted to say something, it was all too late. In the 5-star army, the military commander's authority was still very great. Unless it involved a rebellion, the officers under him had to obey him unconditionally. Otherwise, they would be punished according to military law. Bai Shuang left. He left very decisively, and indeed only brought the 2,000 soldiers of the direct military guards with him. However, others did not know that he did not intend to use all of the 2,000 soldiers. He only needed to bring a battalion into the city. The other 4 battalions were only responsible for keeping watch outside, just in case. Chapter 1284. In the mountains 4 li away from Little Yule City, Bai Shuang was leading the 1st Guard Battalion to change. He took out a large amount of commoner clothing from the military luggage and put it on. As he fastened the buttons on his robe, Bai Shuang said to the large man standing beside him, "Commander Zhuang, I'll leave everything outside to you. If nothing goes wrong, I'll send you a signal at night. When the time comes, you must act quickly." Commander Zhuang's full name was Zhuangcheng. He was originally a deputy battalion commander of the 4th Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. This time Bai Shuang came to the 1st Army. As a trusted aide, his status naturally rose, and he was promoted to Guard Battalion Commander. Zhuangcheng's face was solemn, and his eyes were filled with concern. Hearing this, he immediately stood at attention. "Commander, I'll remember." "Very good, Battalion Commander Xiao, let's go." Bai Shuang had just finished changing his clothes. He glanced at the dozens of men behind him who had also changed their clothes. With a chuckle, he walked towards the nearby official road and headed towards the direction of Little Yule City. Battalion Commander Xiaoqing was originally a company commander of the 4th Regiment. He usually admired Bai Shuang's ability. This time, he took the initiative to come along and obtain the position of Guard Battalion Commander. Bai Shuang and the dozens of men walked on the official road. Little Yule City was already in sight. Bai Shuang couldn't help but slow down and said in a very casual tone, "The enemy has 2,000 soldiers in the city. Are you afraid?" "No." The soldiers all said in unison. To be able to go on a mission with their commander was their honor. If word got out, it would be something to gain face. Furthermore, the other brothers of the 1st Battalion had already changed into the city. They were the last batch. This way they had a total of 400 people. Although they didn't have as many soldiers as the enemy, they still had the ability to fight back. Not to mention, if their commander could lead the troops, he definitely had a thorough plan. What was there to be afraid of? Good, that's how war is. Very satisfied with the soldier's answers, Bai Shuang said confidently, "On the battlefield, just because you're afraid of death, you won't be killed. On the contrary, if you weren't afraid of death, others would only be afraid of you. That way, you would have more chances to protect yourself. All right, you are all courageous and insightful people. Next, I will tell you about the next mission. As long as you are courageous and careful, the mission will not be difficult to complete." Back then, White Shuang had infiltrated and taken down Hobokseri city without shedding a drop of blood. For that, he had been praised by Yang Chendong. This time, he had the same idea. The only difference was that he had changed his approach. This time, he was not going to hold anyone hostage. Instead, he was going to give them gifts. This could be seen from the wooden boxes carried by the burly men behind him. Little Yule City. Although it was considered a border city of Ely, because it was separated by a heavenly mountain, it was a little remote and not very lively. If it weren't for the chaos of war, where many commoners couldn't even fill their stomachs and were running around, the floating population here would be pitifully small. However, it was precisely because of this chaos that the other soldiers, disguised as refugees, did not encounter any trouble from the city guards when they entered the city. On the other hand, Bai Shuang and his group of several dozen people, dressed in bright clothes and full of vigor, quickly attracted the attention of the city guards. "Who are you people? All of you, stop for inspection." The centurion in charge of guarding the city gate had a vigilant look on his face. After all, Bai Shuang's group was too conspicuous. Especially when there was a group of refugees in ragged clothes walking by. It highlighted their different identities. With this shout, Bai Shuang took the lead and stood on the spot. Then he chuckled and said, "Brother, don't be nervous. We are here to find your general and give him a gift." After saying this, Bai Shuang intentionally turned around to look at the two large wooden boxes behind him with a smile on his face. Bai Shuang was a person with delicate features. When he took the initiative to express his goodwill, he could indeed give people a good impression. In addition, there were only 30 brothers behind him. This centurion had 100 people beside him. Of course, he wouldn't take it too seriously. Give him a gift? The centurion was puzzled. It wasn't that he had never seen people giving gifts before, but it was his first time seeing someone giving gifts with such fanfare. Just as he was puzzled, Bai Shuang had already walked in front of him. Then he handed 2 silver ingots worth 10 silver taels each to the centurion. "That's right, we are here to give you a gift. I'll have to trouble you to inform the general that he will definitely reward you handsomely." 20 silver taels was not a small sum for a centurion who wasn't rich. His eyes immediately lit up. He used his hand to measure the quality of the silver. It was definitely of high quality. He immediately withdrew his ferocious expression and changed it into a smile. "All right, since that's the case, follow me. I will bring you to see the general." It was obvious that this centurion still remembered Bai Shuang's words. The general would definitely reward him handsomely. Such a good job couldn't be given to someone else. With this centurion leading the way, it was naturally not difficult to enter the city. Not only that, they quickly arrived at the general's residence. When Bai Shuang saw that most of the houses in the city were dilapidated, but the residence in front of him was majestic and dignified, how could he not know that they had arrived? As expected, the centurion stopped in his tracks and pointed at the courtyard in front of him. "This is the residence of our general Slam. Please." "Thank you, please." Bai Shuang immediately smiled and nodded. He had a look of gratitude as he followed the centurion into the residence. The difference was that Xiaoqing and the others behind him were blocked outside the door. They were watched over by the centurion's soldiers. It could be said that they were being held captive. Bai Shuang didn't show the slightest bit of fear because his subordinates were blocked. On the contrary, he entered with a calm expression. His gaze casually swept around as if he was very interested in everything in the courtyard. However, he knew that he was scouting the enemy. The centurion led the way. He seemed to be very familiar with everything in the residence. Along the way, he didn't let anyone lead him. Even at this time, there wasn't even a housekeeper coming out to welcome him. All of this entered Bai Shuang's eyes and made him feel disdain. From this, it could be seen that the general's standards were too ordinary. The reality was as Bai Shuang expected. Under the centurion's guidance, Bai Shuang easily saw the person in charge slam. He was a man with a rather tall and sturdy figure, but his face was a bit pale. Based on his experience in observing people, Bai Shuang could easily tell that this slam was someone who had been hollowed out by wine and women. This was very consistent with the information sent by the intelligence department. Although Bai Shuang appeared to be very confident along the way, if it wasn't for the fact that he continuously obtained a lot of information about General Ibali from the intelligence department while the land was covered in snow, how could he enter so fearlessly? It was only when the preparation work was done that he appeared to be so confident in doing things. According to the information provided by the intelligence department, this slam was someone who was ostracized by the upper echelons of General Ibali, which was why he was arranged to guard such a remote small city. Bai Shuang was very confident that she could establish a relationship with these people who were depressed and unable to achieve their goals. Slam looked as if he had just woken up from a drunken stupor. When he saw that it was a centurion under his command, he yawned and pointed at Bai Shuang, who was standing there, and said, "Who is he? What is he doing here?" With the opportunity to speak, the centurion thought of the reward. He immediately leaned over with a face full of joy. He came to Slam's side and whispered for a while. Originally, Slam didn't seem to care. He thought that it was another homeless person who wanted to join the army. However, in just a short while, his eyes became brighter and brighter. In the end, before the centurion finished speaking, he had already grabbed his arm and asked with a face full of joy, "You're saying that there are 2 big chests, and that there might be silver inside?" The centurion only felt a burst of pain when Slam grabbed his arm, but he had no choice but to nod and answer, "Yes, General. I haven't seen what's inside the chests, but I think it's silver without a doubt." "Good, good. Then why aren't you bringing it up?" As Slam, who was sent to a remote place, even if he wanted to deduct some silver and receive some benefits, he had nowhere to go. Recently, there were more and more refugees. For a time, there were all kinds of people. There were even many bandits passing by. As a result, the security of Little Yule City wasn't very good. Every day, there were all kinds of bad news, and he was already sick of it. Now that he heard that someone was actually giving him silver, how could he not be happy? In his excitement, he couldn't help but forget himself. The centurion also wanted to see if the chests were filled with silver, but Bai Shuang was still standing there and didn't speak. He looked down on the general's ugly expression and could only remind him softly, "General, the person is here. Shouldn't we first ask him why he's here?" Yes, he had to ask first. Who's the person below? With this reminder, Slamu finally reacted. Then he tidied up his clothes and asked in a very serious manner. Finally, it was his turn. Bai Shuang had already prepared his speech. "General, my surname is Bai, and I'm in the grain business. You also know that in the chaos of war, the price of grain is rising again and again. Therefore, I gave up all my wealth and opened a trade route from the grasslands. As long as the general agrees, we can continuously transport grain from the north of Tianshan Mountain. At that time, we will have to pass through the general's territory. Therefore, this time, I'm here to give the general a gift and hope that we can work together to achieve great things." "What? You're in the grain business? You can transport grain from the north of the mountain? Your Han?" At this moment, Slam's eyes were already wide open. He was completely shocked by Bai Shuang's words. Chapter 1285. If one were to talk about what was the most valuable right now, the first would be food. After all, people could buy less clothes, and even a piece of clothing could be worn for a long time with some mending. However, they could not go without food for a day. Otherwise, there would be problems and even death. Especially in this war, the price of food had increased exponentially. Even though Si Jimu had already received orders to stock up on food, he still felt that the granary in the city was too small. After all, no one knew how long this war would last. There was only going out and not going in. It was truly worrying. And now, someone said that they could get a large amount of food. How could he not be alarmed? The first thing he did was to ask if the other party was Han. After all, Only the Han-led 5-star army would not lack food. That was why they had such a way to transport food. Regarding his identity as Han, Bai Shuang had no intention of hiding it. He did not want to hide it either. Facing Si Zhimu's question, he did not have any intention of denying it. He immediately nodded. General has good eyesight. This one is Han. With this admission, Si Zhimu's body tensed up. Their opponent, the 5-star army, was mainly Han. However, Bai Shuang's next sentence caused Slama's tense nerves to relax a lot. I'm a Han Chinese, but not all Han Chinese are part of the 5-star army. Not all Han Chinese like to fight and are willing to fight. This one only likes to earn money. I do not understand military matters and do not want to understand. And, hearing Bai Shuang say that he was not part of the 5-star army and did not like to fight, he only liked to earn money, Si Zhimu's expression became much better. The centurion to the side was also shocked by Bai Shuang's identity as a Han. He was not afraid that the other party would do anything to him. After all, this was Little Yule City, his territory. He was worried that the reward he was about to receive would be gone. Now that he heard such words, his heart moved. He quickly said to Si Zhimu, General, what he said makes sense. Not all Han people are our enemies. Besides, if he really is an enemy, why would he give you money? I'm afraid that he would have long come over with weapons. That makes sense. Living in a remote area, Sama didn't know much about the 5-star army, so he didn't think the 5-star army was that scary. The most important thing was that he also believed that this was Little Yule City, and this was his territory. There were only a few dozen people here, but he had 2,000 soldiers. If the other party dared to act rashly, he only needed to give an order to settle everything. Furthermore, he knew that if he were White Double, he definitely wouldn't have the guts to barge into the 5-star army's barracks. Judging others by his own standards, Sama's vigilance dropped a lot. When he looked at White Shuang, he focused all his attention on the grain business. What did you say your surname was? General, he said his surname is Bai. The centurion said with a flattering look. Oh yes, Mr. Bai, right? You said that you can transport food. Then may I ask where the food is? Slamu resumed his high and mighty general appearance and asked Bai Shuang. Seeing the other party ask such an idiotic question, Bai Shuang couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then he felt that the situation wasn't right. Seeing Slama's confused expression, he took the initiative to explain. General, this time I'm only the vanguard. I'm in charge of clearing all the checkpoints. Also, we're not very sure if there's a need for food here. Only after understanding everything will the food be transported here in large quantities. With this explanation, Slama's old face turned red. He also knew that he seemed to have asked a very stupid question. But right now his attention wasn't on this at all. He was thinking about large quantities of food. When White Shuang finished speaking, he immediately said, Lack of food. I'll take as much as you have, but I don't know the price. The price is only 30% higher than the market price. White Shuang hesitated for a moment, then tentatively raised 3 fingers. 30%. Hearing this price, Slamu seemed to have been pricked by something. With a whoosh he bounced up from the chair. What? 30% is a lot? That won't do. 20% is fine. White Shuang looked very careful, showing his worry and nervousness. No, it's not much. 30% is already very good. The laughing Slamu had already walked over from the chair and came to White Shuang's side. He was very clear that in Ely food was priceless. Anyone who had some skills and some strength would be hoarding food. They were afraid that if there was a war, there would be no food to eat. Who would be willing to sell food? Not to mention 30%. Even if it was doubled or even tripled, they would still easily sell it. Thinking about it this way, this was definitely a big deal. White Shuang had undoubtedly become a noble person in his eyes. He immediately came to White Shuang's side with a face full of smiles. His eyes were filled with indescribable passion. Because he was too passionate, White Shuang couldn't help but take a step back. General, don't lie to me. Is 30% really no problem? White Shuang's eyes moved as he spoke, showing his shrewd side on his face. Of course there's no problem. I'll take as much as you send, ha. Slama laughed loudly. He originally thought that after being sent to this remote little city, it would be difficult for him to achieve anything in his life. He didn't think that a good thing would fall into his lap. How could he not grasp it? At this moment, White Shuang's heart finally settled. The business was more or less done. Next, White Shuang brought up the 2 boxes of silver he had prepared. At this moment, Slamu was shocked to the point of choking. He had a new understanding of White Shuang's wealth and no longer doubted it. After all, if he didn't have a request, why would he give him so many benefits first? Regardless of whether there was food or not, just based on these 2 boxes of silver, it was not a loss to make this friend. The things that should be set up were done. Everything that followed was much easier. Bringing White Shuang and the others to the residence, a banquet was set up. Under White Shuang's request, all the officers with some authority in the city were invited to the residence. At the banquet that night, Slamu even put his arm around White Shuang's shoulder in front of everyone and introduced him as his brother. In the future, everyone should give him face and so on. When the other generals saw this situation, how could they not know what to do? One by one, they took the initiative to come to White Shuang's side to toast him, wanting to get familiar with him. White Shuang's alcohol tolerance was not bad. He didn't refuse anyone and led his brothers to drink with everyone. This drinking lasted for nearly 4 hours. In the end, most of the generals in the courtyard had collapsed to the ground. White Shuang, who was also 40% drunk, shook his head. He didn't forget his mission. Looking at the battalion commander Xiaoqing who hadn't drunk, he said, "Go, this is Slama's military seal. Take it and let your brothers into the city. Gather the other soldiers in the city and watch over them." "Yes," Xiaoqing said with a face full of excitement. At this moment he was completely convinced by the military chief. He had only used 2 chests of silver to take down the entire Little Yule city, without shedding a drop of blood. Most importantly, he had completely sealed off the news of the army entering the city. This was a true wise man, a true expert. Xiaoqing left. Using the commander's seal, he quickly found Commander Zhuangcheng, who was waiting for news outside the city. What happened next was much simpler. The 5-star division quietly entered the city. Following that, they gathered all the guards inside. After that, they removed their weapons and became prisoners of war. All of this was completed before daybreak. Then the signal was sent out. An extremely bright flash grenade soared into the sky. 3 li away, 2 high, and the others who were waiting for news immediately brought over 30,000 soldiers towards Little Yule City. The sky finally brightened. Slamu, who was in a daze, was awoken by the urge to urinate. When he slowly opened his eyes, he didn't have the urge to urinate anymore. This was because at this moment, a steel blade was placed on his neck. Surrounding him was a group of 5-star army soldiers wearing military green uniforms. This is a dream. This must be a dream. Slamu hurriedly closed his eyes. Then he opened them again. However, nothing had changed. There was only a fierce gaze in Commander Xiaoqing's eyes. "General C, you're finally awake? Then let's have a good talk now." "Talk? Talk about what?" Slama's voice was trembling as he spoke. Even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't have thought that the 5-star army would appear in front of him. Even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't have thought that the enemy would leap over the mountains. Because perhaps people and horses could leap over. But what about the army's rations? How could he know that White Shuang didn't bring any rations over? He only had the soldiers carry rations for 5 days. This was because he believed that as long as they came here, there would naturally be people who would give them rations. White Shuang, who had already grasped the situation, suddenly had a fierce look in his eyes. He knew that he should show Slama some power. Otherwise, he was afraid that this person wouldn't cooperate with him. Now that he had occupied the capital of Little Yule, there were 2 ways to enter the deeper regions of Ili Belly. The first was to head south to the capital of Big Yule. From there he would enter the Tex River. And then to the north would be the Katimian Mountains, which would be to the south of the capital of Ili Belly. The other was to head north, through the 3 cities of Nalatu, Telhala, and Kongisi, and across the Kongisi River, he would reach the capital of Ili Belly. Comparatively speaking, the latter path was more difficult to advance. However, the strength of the enemy would also be heavier. This was more in line with Yang Qindong's military plans. However, he didn't make the final choice. Everything would depend on the result of his discussion with Slamu. He believed that this person would definitely bring him a pleasant surprise. Chapter 1286. Facing Bai Shuang's murderous gaze, Slamu's heart trembled. He had thought of something and his thoughts came true. He heard Bai Shuang say coldly, "I can tell you now that I'm not a merchant. We're the 5-star army. We've crossed Tianshan Mountain to come here. This time, we're here to take your king's dog life. Trust me, it won't be long before this place becomes the territory of our 5-star army. All the soldiers here who oppose us will be killed, or become captives who will never see the light of day. You're very lucky to be caught by us first. Now you're still useful. As long as you're willing to cooperate with us, I promise you'll live a good life. Of course, you can choose not to cooperate. However, I know you, but the blade in my hand doesn't. Please make your choice." As he spoke, he intentionally waved the blade in his hand. The sharp blade flashed in front of Slamu, scaring him out of his wits. Speaking of which, no one wasn't afraid of death. Especially Slamu, who was used to being a general. He could treat other people's lives like grass, but he couldn't do that to himself. In addition, he had been marginalized for many years. He had a lot of complaints against the upper echelons, so he wasn't loyal at all. Now, in order to survive, he didn't have any psychological pressure. He already had the thought of surrendering, but he still wanted to fight for more benefits. After Slama's eyes looked around, he looked at Bai Shuang who was waiting for an answer and said, "How can I believe you? How can the glory and wealth you speak of be fulfilled?" Even at this time, Slama was still thinking about how to obtain more benefits for himself. In the eyes of these people, there was no such thing as a nation, a country, or dignity. They only cared about their own benefits. If these people were in the 5-star army, needless to say, once they were discovered, they wouldn't be put in an important position. They might even be kicked out of the army at any time and sent to be punished. Bai Shuang looked down on these people. His tone wasn't polite. "Slamu, you're now our prisoner. Do you think you still have the right to talk about conditions? You can only choose to believe us now. Otherwise, we'll cut you in half right now and hang you on the city wall to let you have a taste of the wind and rain." "No, I'll cooperate with you. I'll completely cooperate with you. I just hope you keep your promise." When Slamu heard these ruthless words and saw Bai Shuang's unfriendly gaze, he immediately replied with a face full of fear. Bai Shuang was very satisfied with just a scare and Slamu was convinced. In order to make the other party cooperate with him better, White Shuang also intentionally retracted his killing intent, and a smile appeared on his face. "That's the way, right? Don't worry, our 5-star army are very friendly to our friends. You can also go and scare them a little. As long as our 5-star army occupies a place, most of the local generals will be responsible for the security work. If your performance is satisfactory, not only will you receive a large amount of rewards, you might even have the chance to become the general of this area in the future." Good. Hearing that if he did his job well, he would even have a higher position, Slama's eyes revealed a look of yearning. He immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Very quickly, he told White Double Ears everything he knew, including the military arrangements of the nearby cities and the situation of the military forces. Tu Hai and the other 3 division commanders were already waiting in the hall. When Bai Shuang brought Slamu in front of them, the attitude of the 4 was clearly much more respectful than before. They had already heard about what had happened. Bai Shuang was the commander of an army, and his status was extremely noble. However, he had still entered the tiger's den, daring to bring a few dozen people into Little Yule City. Then, without harming a single brother, he had taken control of the situation here. Just based on this, it wasn't something the 4 division commanders could do. They might be able to take down Little Yule City with a small price, but they definitely couldn't do it as quietly as Bai Shuang. The most important thing was that the news of them appearing here wasn't leaked. This gave them more time to prepare and choose, creating better conditions for the next attack. After Bai Shuang entered the hall, he noticed the attitude of the 4 division commanders. They were clearly more respectful. This made him very satisfied. He didn't expect these people to immediately submit to him, But as long as they didn't hinder him, he believed that his performance in the future would make them truly submit. You're all here. Let me introduce you. This is General Slamu. He is now our friend, and is willing to provide us with everything we need to know. He is also willing to cooperate with us. Now let's ask him to explain the surrounding situation. Bai Shuang smiled and nodded at Slamu. He had already heard it once. Now that he had Slamu explain it again, it wasn't that Bai Shuang's memory was bad. On the contrary, he was very smart. The reason why he did this, other than letting the 4 division commanders understand the situation, he also wanted to test Slamu again, and see if he introduced the same thing twice. Once he found a problem, he would properly explain it. Fortunately, Slamu really surrendered at this moment, so what he said was naturally true. 2 introductions. The language might be reversed, but the meaning didn't change. Bai Shuang finally relaxed. He looked at the 4 division commanders and said, "Now that everyone understands the situation, let's talk about what you all think." The East Army's new 5th Army. After speeding up their march all the way to Lopner River, they went straight to Lop City in the southwest direction. Under the lead of Sherwanshan, they advanced at a speed of a few hundred li per day. What they wanted was to take the enemy by surprise. They wanted to directly attack the enemy. According to Yang Chendong's request, they moved unhindered in the Yarkiang Kingdom, so that they didn't have time and energy to deal with the Turpan Kingdom. The 5-star Army's main force would be able to take over the Turpan Kingdom. The new army also bypassed Khaleesi City and came to the Iron Gate Pass behind it, cutting off the retreat of the Turpan Kingdom's army, making it a completely isolated city. It also forced Hardenbarter to send reinforcements. The strategy of encircling and attacking reinforcements has been formed. In the Turpan Kingdom, when all kinds of information were gathered through the radio, Yang Chendong was naturally very satisfied after reading it. It can be said that the performance of the 3 armies was better than he expected. They didn't care about the gains and losses of a city, and only wanted to destroy the enemy's strength. This kind of strategic thinking was very advanced. He believed that when the enemy reacted, it would be too late for them to regret it. For now, let these 3 monkeys continue to cause trouble. When the time is right, it will be time for him to lead the army to battle. At this time, Yang Chendong's mood was very good. Beta Persei noticed this and hurriedly came over. "Young master, you also have to take care of your body. Don't always be like this. If you have work, you can give it to others." Knowing that Beta Persei was concerned about him, Yang Chendong had a smile on his face. How could he not want to rest? But anyone who wanted to achieve such a big goal in a short period of time would have no time to rest. How is Division Commander Tian and Division Commander Ling doing? The 2 people he was talking about were the Division Commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu, and the Division Commander of the 4th Division, Ling Daqiang. After the liberation, they received the order to liberate the Fire Province, Willow City, and other places around Turpan. As the capital of Turpan, there were many large cities and strategic towns around Turpan. It was just that because of the geographical location, they couldn't provide much protection. When Hardenbarter escaped, he didn't escape to those places, causing them to become isolated cities. For the safety of the rear, Yang Chendong decided to liberate these cities. Only then could he walk out of Turpan without any worries. When it came to the situation of these cities, Beta Persei's face immediately showed an excited expression. "Young master, everything is going well. The Fire Province has been taken." So fast. Hearing that the Fire Province had been captured, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with surprise. "Tell me the details." "Yes. We first sent people to the Fire Province to persuade them to surrender, but the effect was not good. Although they didn't kill people because of the strength of our 5-star army, they threw the emissary out of the city, which angered the 2 division commanders. They divided the work, and the 4th Division blasted open the west gate of the Fire Province city with a few cannons. Then, Division Commander Tian who led the brave cavalry into the city. What followed was naturally a one-sided situation. The Fire Province city was broken in less than half a day. Most of the 20,000 Turpan soldiers guarding the city surrendered, and a few were killed. Now the two division commanders are using the same method to go to Yanghire City. The news just came, and it seems that the problem can be solved peacefully. When talking about this, Beta Persei's face was full of joy. Clearly, this person was a warmonger in his bones. Young Chendong was also very satisfied after hearing this. Yes, that's right. If we don't attack, then it's fine. If we move, then it's like a bolt of lightning. Don't give them a chance to fight back. Of course, if we can solve the problem without using a single soldier, then that's naturally the best. Yes, I'll immediately send someone to pass on the young master's order. Beta Persei knew that young Chendong was a person who loved his soldiers like his children. This was also because he didn't want to make too many sacrifices, so he immediately nodded. Then, seeing that young Chendong was indeed in a good mood, he tried to suggest, "Young master, today's official business is not so busy. Why don't we take a walk on the street? You don't know, but Turpan City is very lively right now." Chapter 1287. Young Chendong was right about this. Ever since this place was occupied by the Five-Star Army, especially after the previous siege of Turpan, the hearts of the people here had all fallen to the Five-Star Army's side. In addition, this was a big city and the front line of the battle, so it naturally became the first choice of the fleeing people of the Three Kingdoms. They had already made sufficient preparations, and there was enough food in the city. There were nearly 100 big and small grain stores, which greatly solved the problem of food for the people. More and more people stayed here, so it was naturally very lively. Young Chendong sat in the palace every day. Even if he did not step out of the palace, he could still understand a lot of things through the radio. This made it difficult for him to have any leisure time. Now that the military affairs were going smoothly, he could take a walk on the streets to understand the actual situation. If he discovered some practical problems, he would not have to work and rest. After thinking about it, he did not leave the palace for a long time, so he nodded. Okay, then go and make the arrangements. Remember, don't bring too many guards. Don't disturb the security of the city. Since he said not to bring too many guards, Beta Persei did not dare to be negligent. As the core of Yangxia and the soul of the Five-Star Army, his safety had always been the most important. After Beta Persei got Young Chendong's approval, he quickly went out and called the Longwei's first captain, Xiu Vi, over. Then a team of 50 Longwei elites changed into casual clothes and prepared. This was only what could be seen. There were still 200 Longwei members who would follow outside. Once they found any problems, they would immediately appear and provide support. Young Chendong also changed into a green robe and led Beta Persei, Xiu Vi and the others out of the palace to the streets. At this time, Turpan City was indeed as Beta Persei had said. The streets were crowded with people, and it was a lively scene. On both sides of the road, there were countless shops of all kinds. Everything related to food, clothing, housing, and transportation was not lacking. These were all operated by the people of other races who had migrated here. Their arrival made the city even more lively and prosperous, filled with people. Occasionally, people in ragged clothes could be seen on the streets. They were all people who had fled from Turpan, Yarkyang, and Ili. Every time they saw them, they could see the surprise and caution in their eyes. They were surprised by the prosperity of Turpan City, and careful that their identity and clothes seemed to be somewhat out of place here. As the group walked, Beta Persei introduced what he had learned to Young Chendong. Young master, these people will generally be observed for 2 days after entering the city. First, let them feel the prosperity of our Yangxia land. This will make them more confident in their future life, and make them more prepared to integrate here in the future. Second, it will also make it easier for our soldiers to observe them. If there are spies from the Three Kingdoms among them, they will often give themselves away, and it will be easier for us to screen them. Of course, after 2 days, those who have no problems will be invited to the shelter in the city to register. Then they will be transported to the beginning city by the vehicles transporting supplies. There, they will report to the logistics headquarters of Yangxi for resettlement and distribution. Young Chendong listened silently and nodded from time to time. He doesn't pay too much attention to these things now. With Yangxia on the right track, he only needs to make decisions on some important matters. These matters will naturally be handled by specialized personnel. Sometimes, when they report the results, he may not even check them. Not bad, this is a good way to deal with it. The governor of the Far Eastern state, Chinbo, sent a telegram a while ago, saying that there is a large amount of newly opened land that no one is planting. Moreover, the land there is very fertile. It is really too wasteful. Now that we need manpower, we can consider letting Yangtze send more people over. Listening to Yang Chendong's instructions, Beta Persei of course agreed, and kept it in mind. At this time he was not only the captain of Yang Chendong's guards, but also the butler, secretary, assistant and other positions. It can be said that he has a high position and power, but he is also very busy. While they were talking, the road in front suddenly became very crowded. Looking from a distance, they could see that many people were gathered there, and it seemed that there were a lot of people. On the periphery, many 5th Star Army soldiers in military green uniforms were maintaining law and order. What's going on? With so many people crowded here, Yang Chendong asked with a slight frown. Go and ask around. Beta Persei didn't often go out of the palace, so he naturally didn't know. He ordered Chiovi beside him. Very quickly, the two quick-witted dragon guards rushed forward and returned after a short while. Because they were on the street, they didn't salute Yang Chendong. Instead, they cupped their hands and said, "Sixth young master, the female soldiers in the propaganda office are setting up a stage to perform a show. There are many people watching nearby." Oh, the propaganda office. Hearing this, Yang Chendong was also interested. He laughed and said with great interest, "Then let's go and take a look." "Okay, I'll arrange it." Beta Persei quickly agreed. Of course, he wouldn't let the young master and the people crowded together to watch the show. If that happened, safety would be a big problem. Immediately, he sent out a few people to look for a spot nearby. He had heard that as long as there was a performance, there would be good observation points in the nearby restaurants. Usually, these places would be occupied by the soldiers of the 5-Star Army in advance to prevent people from causing trouble and causing problems in terms of safety. Not long after the Longwei left, they came back to report that they had found the 3rd floor of a restaurant. The location was excellent, and the view was excellent. The 5th Star Army soldiers who were responsible for observing there had already withdrawn. They were only waiting for Yang Chendong to go. "Let's go." Yang Chendong also knew that with his current status, it was really not suitable for him to mingle with the people. At least, it was not possible in Turpan City, where the situation was not completely stable. So he nodded and let the Longwei lead him to a nearby restaurant. The 3rd floor was high and looked down from above. It was the big stage of the propaganda office. From here, he could overlook everything. There were originally a few tables on the 3rd floor, but they were completely empty at this moment. The table with the best view had a fruit plate placed on it. Yang Chendong naturally sat at the head of the table. He looked around and saw that the soldiers of the propaganda office were performing. There were many female soldiers among them, and all of them were young and beautiful. Their presence made the show even more attractive. Not long after Yang Chendong sat down, footsteps came from the stairs of the 3rd floor, followed by soft greetings. Yang Chendong's ears were extraordinary, so he naturally heard it clearly. Everyone was calling the 8th vice captain. Needless to say, it must be Ba Daojiang, the vice captain of the Longwei 1st Brigade. It was Ba Daojiang. He was off duty today. He had just heard that Yang Chendong came out of the palace and came to the street, so he quickly rushed over. As soon as he entered the 3rd floor and saw Yang Chendong sitting there, he immediately gave a standard military salute. "Okay, you're not wearing your military uniform, so there's no need to salute." Yang Chendong looked at Ba Daojiang with a satisfied gaze and nodded gently. Although Ba Daojiang was not the first person to follow Yang Chendong, he was an old man who had been here before the origin city was built. He had always been good, and was responsible for Yang Chendong's safety. He had never neglected his duties. Yang Chendong's attitude toward such a person was naturally much more casual. Yang Chendong's tone was so casual. When Captain Chiovi heard it, he chuckled and then took the opportunity to tease him. "What's wrong, Vice Captain? You're here to escort the publicity department when you're on vacation. This is almost your second home. Is something good going to happen soon?" The burly Ba Daojiang suddenly blushed at this time, which was rare for him. He threw a look at Qiu Vi, telling him to shut up. Although Ba Daojiang was the vice captain, he had a very good relationship with Captain Qiu Vi. The two of them had gone through countless dangers and life-and-death situations together. Their relationship was not any worse than that of brothers. It was precisely because of this that some of his words could be said to be heard clearly by Qiu Vi. That was why he could make fun of him. Hearing this, Beta Persei and the Longwei could not help but laugh. Only Yang Chendong looked confused. What are you talking about? When Yang Chendong asked, the people below naturally did not dare to not answer. Beta Persei then whispered in front of him. Young master, the situation is like this. Ba Daojiang has fallen in love with the publicity department's director, Shui Qing. At this time he is stepping up his attack on the city. Oh. Yang Chendong, who heard the news, nodded as if he suddenly realized something. He was really too busy, so he naturally did not pay too much attention to the matters of the soldiers around him. However, Yang Chendong knew about Shui Qing. She was considered an old member of the publicity department, and was also one of the subordinates that the sixth madam, Luan Xiaoyu, valued. He had some impression of this person. After being exposed, Ba Daojiang's face turned even redder. At this moment he lowered his head, losing his usual vigor. Seeing this, Yang Chendong laughed. Men should get married when they are of age. What's there to be embarrassed about? I just don't know how your progress is. Don't embarrass Longwei. Even Yang Chendong began to make fun of him. The Longwei could not help but laugh. Ba Daojiang, whose face was even redder, stretched his neck and said, Sixth young master, Shui Qing has a good impression of me. But she said that she is too busy with work now, so she wants to wait a while before discussing the marriage. Obviously, Ba Daojiang was afraid that others would look down on him, so he directly admitted it. Oh. Then there's no problem. Not bad. Hearing this answer, Yang Chendong knew that this was a matter of mutual consent. He thought that since he had nothing to do, he might as well be the matchmaker for another month. He nodded slowly and said, We have always been very busy with work, and will only get busier in the future. How can we have time to rest? How about this, you call Shui Qing over. I will ask her. If there is no problem with her, I will make the decision for your marriage. Chapter 1288. Yang Chendong knew that there would be a huge war coming up and there would be no time left. Ba Daojiang wasn't young anymore. He might as well take this opportunity to settle the matter. It would be a good thing to fulfill someone's wish. The sixth young master was going to be the witness. Ba Daojiang grinned from ear to ear. Qiu Vi, who was standing at the side, saw that his deputy only knew how to smile and didn't do anything. He couldn't help but kick him. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and invite Miss Shui Qing over. Oh, I'll go right away. Ba Daojiang, who had regained his senses, immediately agreed. He then turned around and disappeared from the third floor. Seeing how anxious he was, the Longwei crowd burst into laughter. In less than an instant's time, Ba Daojiang dragged the panting Shui Qing to the third floor of the restaurant and stood in front of Yang Chendong. Shui Qing was originally organizing a performance downstairs. Previously, she was the publicity director of the Origin City region. Now, she was promoted to the publicity director of the entire grassland region. There were many things that she needed to do every day. When Ba Daojiang suddenly appeared by her side, she was both happy and surprised. When Ba Daojiang first appeared by her side and expressed his desire to pursue her, Shui Qing also fell in love with this honest man. Later on, because of work, the two of them spent more time apart than together. However, this didn't dilute their feelings for each other. Instead, it made them feel like they were newlyweds every time they met. Later on, when the two of them were talking about marriage, Ba Daojiang even said that he would find a chance to report this matter to the sixth young master and invite him to be the witness. Regarding this matter, Shui Qing only listened to it for a while. What kind of person was the sixth young master? How many things did he have to do every day? How would he have the time to deal with these small matters? Although Ba Daojiang was the vice captain of the Black Cavalry 1st Platoon, and could be considered one of Yang Qindong's men. She didn't have any illusions. She didn't expect that Ba Daojiang would suddenly appear just now. Shui Qing thought that he missed her again. Just when she was overjoyed, but because she was too busy with work, Ba Daojiang suddenly grabbed her hand. Then the two of them ran out in front of all the people backstage of the publicity department. Although Shui Qing had long acknowledged her relationship with Ba Daojiang, and thought that she was his woman for the rest of her life. However, the wedding banquet had not been held yet, and the two of them were still scrupulously abiding by their identities. They had never had any physical intimacy. Now that her hand was grabbed in front of everyone, she blushed. When she finally reacted, her expression became even better. At the same time, she blamed Ba Daojiang and asked him to let go of her hand and let her go. All right, let's not worry about other things at this time. The sixth young master is waiting for us upstairs. Let's go. Ba Daojiang knew what Shui Qing was thinking. Women were always shy. However, he really didn't have time to wait. Who knew if there would be some urgent matter that would call the sixth young master back? If that was the case, he would miss a great opportunity. Just now, the platoon leader took the opportunity to tell the sixth young master about him. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Holding Shui Qing's hand, he jogged all the way to the third floor of the restaurant and stood in front of Yang Qindong. When she saw Yang Qindong with her own eyes, Shui Qing's heart, which was already racing from jogging all the way, started to beat even faster. The current Yang Qindong was like a god in the eyes of the Yangxie people and the five-star army. Especially after the publicity department had been instructed to deliberately create a cult of personality, his reputation had spread at a rapid pace. As the most important middle-level cadre in the publicity department, Shui Qing naturally regarded Yang Qindong as a god. Now that she was able to get close to the god in her heart, Shui Qing was very excited. You must be Shui Qing. Not bad. He looked at Shui Qing and found that this girl had a great temperament. Especially when she was wearing the lieutenant colonel uniform. It made her look even more valiant and full of an indescribable heroic spirit. This girl was quite compatible with a burly man like Ba Daojiang. A single word of praise made Shui Qing's face blossom into a smile, like a lotus flower emerging from the water. Her face carried a brilliant yet somewhat bashful smile. Thank you for the king's praise. With Shui Qing's status, she could only call Yang Qindong king. She couldn't casually call him king. No problem, Director Shui Qing. You can call me sixth young master like Ba Daojiang. Yang Qindong smiled and said with a warm voice. In order to make Shui Qing feel less restrained, Yang Qindong smiled and asked about work. He knew that when interacting with people, he had to start with the areas that they were most familiar with. This way, he could quickly eliminate the barriers between them. As expected, when it came to reporting work, Shui Qing became less shy and more shrewd and capable. Yes, sixth young master. Under the guidance of Logistics Commander Yang, our publicity department just carried out an expansion of recruitment. To be honest, there are many girls who are good at singing and dancing in the grasslands. We went through a serious selection process. After the political investigation department participated in the selection process, we recruited a total of 1,200 new members. Now they have been divided into 12 publicity teams and have begun to perform in various places. The performance team on the streets of Turpan City today is one of them. They are currently performing the defense of Turpan City. Not long ago, we used the Turpan brothers, Tumu, as the model and added some exaggerated techniques to create this performance. Listening to Shui Qing's report, Yang Qindong was also interested. He knew about Tomu. This person was a local of Turpan City. At first he wanted to earn money, so he joined the defense of Turpan City. Later on, he fully displayed his ability to fight on the battlefield. Now he was already a company commander of 100 soldiers. Although his position wasn't very high, as a local of Turpan, he could be a representative and a model to promote. More often than not, the more grassroots people would resonate with them. It could be said that this was a very good example. Yes, I know about Tumu. You chose him as the model, so your train of thought is correct. Then tell me, how are the results? Yang Chendong wanted to know what kind of changes the performance of the publicity team could bring to the overall situation. After all, if the performance was only for the sake of completing the mission, but there were no results, then the performance would lose its true meaning. At this moment, Shui Qing's face revealed a confident expression. Sixth young master, the results are very good. With Tumu as the model, the recruitment office has already sent a notice. Now there are many people who have signed up. They are already too busy. Oh, not bad, not bad. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the results. To be able to recruit more soldiers from the local area was naturally something that he was happy to see. They were familiar with the local situation and had long adapted to the local climate. With them, the combat troops could take fewer detours. Listening to Yang Chendong's praise, Shui Qing's face was even sweeter than eating honey, and her small face was bright red. Seeing that Yang Chendong was in a good mood, Beta Persei also thought of some things he had heard before. He decided to put in more effort and put in some good words for Shui Qing. When he was pursuing Kikich, this director Shui Qing helped him a lot. He would not forget this favor. Young master, I heard that since the performance of the publicity team, the people have a better understanding of our army and some of our policies, so the voices and emotions against us have decreased a lot. There's such a thing. Listening to Beta Persei's further explanation, Yang Chendong laughed out loud. Very good. This is the change brought to people's lives and work by literature and art. Well, I hope the publicity department will continue to expand the performance team. I think 10 teams are a bit too few. I'll talk to Yang Si later. It should be expanded. 100 is not a lot. Since Yang Chendong said so, Shui Qing immediately agreed happily and kept nodding. She would not forget that when she wanted to expand the publicity department, she had to persuade Yang Si for a long time. If she did not have the backing of the 6th Madam, Luan Xiaoyu, she was afraid that the expansion of these 10 teams would not be supported. But now it was different. With Yang Chendong's endorsement, it would be much easier to go to the logistics headquarters to ask for people and money. Even the 6th young master was so supportive of their work and praised their work. Who would dare to neglect it? Who would not listen to the 6th young master's words? This meeting was a happy one for everyone. After all, Yang Chendong had too many things to do. He stayed in the restaurant for a while and watched the performance below. He saw that there were more and more people gathering around, and they all revealed looks of curiosity, especially some young people. No matter if they were men or women, they all revealed looks of yearning. Yang Chendong knew that the performance of the publicity team could continue to be carried out in order to win more people's hearts and gain more people's support. Speaking of publicity teams, it was very difficult for the people to see them in the past. Occasionally, some vaudeville troupes could perform on the streets. There was no Peking opera in that era. And where could they find so many handsome men and beautiful women in such troupes? Where could they find such good and diverse education and story themes? The publicity team was a pioneer. As soon as they appeared, they attracted everyone's attention. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, they liked them very much. It was precisely because they liked him that they were willing to learn more about him. Then they would know more about the 5-star army and Yang Shi. This kind of publicity could often achieve something that even 1,000,000 soldiers couldn't do. When Yang Chendong brought people to watch the performance on the streets and did not return, the 1st Cavalry Division had already taken down Yanghe City and was cleaning up the battlefield. Chapter 1289. The newly appointed commander of the 4th Regiment, Su Kuda, looked at the corpses of the Torpon soldiers strewn about in front of him, and felt a wave of dizziness. If his memory served him right, the battle had only lasted for an hour, but the 7,000 Torpon soldiers in the city had been utterly defeated. Just the 4th Regiment that he led had killed over 400 of the enemy, capturing close to 1,000. The most inconceivable thing was that not a single one of his soldiers had died in battle. Only 4 of them had been injured, and most of them were light injuries. They only needed to be treated before they could return to the battlefield. This was completely different from the bloody battle he had imagined. Although before the 1st Cavalry Division had entered the city, Lung Feng and the 4th Regiment had already used their cannons to blast through the city gates, preventing them from bearing the burden of sieging the city, but after entering the city, the performance of the cavalry under him was simply too valiant. Any Turpan soldier in front of them was easily defeated by a single charge, to the point that the enemy did not even have the strength to retaliate. Rather than calling it a battle, it was more accurate to call it a massacre. He had long heard that the 1st Cavalry Division was the most valiant cold weapon unit in the 5-star army, but having experienced it personally, he could not imagine it to be so valiant. In comparison, he felt that the victories he had won in the past did not count as much. In fact, they could not even be called great victories, and could only be described as obvious victories. Su Kuda couldn't be blamed for this. In the past, he had led an army of foreign races. Although there were some soldiers with good physical fitness, they didn't have much organization. It was difficult for them to coordinate well in battle. Yang Chendong also didn't give them more time to train. He simply let these soldiers search for experience on the battlefield. With the mentality of eliminating sand from the waves, this kind of army often didn't have much fewer casualties than the enemy. After spending so much time with such an army, it would be strange if he was not surprised to see the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division. While he was still in a daze, a cavalry unit came over from the side. The leader was the 5th Regiment commander Gong Feng. As the 2 regiments were not far from each other, he had also noticed Su Kuda's performance. Gong Feng was curious about this regiment commander who had fallen from the position of commander, and had his own opinions. Gong Feng believed that Su Kuda was only punished because he had done something wrong. He still had a bright future ahead of him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been demoted to a regiment commander, but directly handed over to the disciplinary investigation department. Besides, this was the position of the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. In his opinion, the value of this position was no less than that of an ordinary division commander. In fact, it might even be better. Su Keita wouldn't lose out much by coming here. Unlike them, this person would leave this place soon. After all, someone who was chosen by the 6th young master to be the commander of an army must have extraordinary ability in commanding an army. Since that was the case, there were only benefits and no disadvantages to befriending this person. Regiment Commander Su, the battlefield should be pretty much cleaned up, right? Using the opportunity when the team walked past the 4th Regiment, Gong Feng casually spoke. "Oh, it's Regiment Commander Gong. Is your 5th Regiment done?" Seeing that it was Gong Feng who was speaking to him, Su Kuda didn't dare to be negligent. He knew that other than himself, the other 4 regimental commanders were all very powerful. In terms of commanding ability, they weren't any worse than him. And it's done. You can also hurry up here. In fact, cleaning up the battlefield this time is relatively simple. The Mongol army from that day has already arrived. Let them take over. Our 1st Cavalry Division needs to show our might on the battlefield. There's no need to be serious about cleaning up the battlefield, Gong Feng said with his experience. Then he nodded at Su Kuda and led the team away. Looking at Gong Feng's departing figure, Su Kuda thanked him. Gong Feng had come to give him advice. It seems that he would have to learn how to adapt in the future. Of course, he knew that he wouldn't be here for too long. This could be seen from the attitude of Division Commander Tian, who and the other regimental commanders towards him. They were very polite to him, to the point that they treated him as a guest and not one of their own. Su Kuda naturally wouldn't think that he could integrate into the enemy's camp in such a short time. What he needed to do now was to use all the time he had to learn the strengths of the 1st Cavalry Division. One day, when he was leading an army by himself, he should have a big change and a better performance. After the Black Goat City was successfully broken through, the next target was Willow City. When the 4th Division of Lung Feng once again moved the cannons to the city gates, unexpectedly, they actually surrendered. The 12,000 Turkmen soldiers in the city all came out of the city and surrendered. Obviously, whether it was the Fire Province or the Black Goat City, they all knew that the strength of the 5-star army in front of them wasn't something that they could stop. Rather than losing their lives in the end, it was better to surrender now and at least keep one life. Following the capture of Willow City, in the entire east of Turkmenistan, other than the ruined city near the Hanhai Sea, there were no other Turkmen forces. Even this city only had 2,000 soldiers. Any one of them would be able to take it down. After dealing with the security threat in the east, Yang Chendong also needed to consider sending troops to Turkmenistan. It was time to completely destroy the Turkmenistan forces. He had this plan a long time ago. Once the various forces were in place, Yang Chendong would personally lead the troops out of Turkmenistan and begin his conquest of the Ili region. It was also at this time that the 250,000 troops of the Kazakh and Ares dynasty arrived in the Ili region. Their appearance increased the confidence of the three Turkmenistan countries to go against the Five-Star Army. After leaving Turpan, Yang Chendong decided to fight his first battle at Sabashi City, another large city in Turpan that was heading south. Based on the Intel Department's intel, there were 15,000 Turkmen soldiers in Sabashi City. They had already made preparations to defend the city. There was enough grain in the city, and there were huge rocks, logs, and kerosene on the city walls. They were just waiting for the Five-Star Army to arrive and teach them a lesson. The morale of an army depended on whether they won the battle or not. Let's put it this way. If they were defeated in a few battles, any army would face a situation where their morale was low. If there was even the slightest movement, it was very likely that they would collapse. Sabashi City was the first line of defense that Hardenbartle had left for the Five-Star Army. He did not even hope that the city could be defended. As long as he could delay for a period of time and make it difficult for the Five-Star Army, it would be considered a victory. This way, once winter arrived, the Five-Star Army would have no choice but to stop attacking. He wanted to see how long the Five-Star Army could stay here. In short, Hardenbartle was using the word, holding back. He would not take the initiative to fight the Five-Star Army. He wanted to use the cities one by one to slow down the Five-Star Army's advance. Once the Five-Star Army's main force dared to go around these cities, he would find a way to cut off the enemy's logistical supply and force the enemy to retreat. Unlike the new army and the other three armies, the Five-Star Army's original goal was not to attack cities. Therefore, once they encountered a city that was difficult to attack, they only needed to go around it. As for the problem of the army's food, they could fight while looting. This was what people often said about using war to support war. Although they were both part of the Five-Star Army, Yang Chendong's main force could not do this. His goal was to capture cities and seize large amounts of territory. Therefore, no matter how one looked at it, the loss of Sabashi City could not be avoided. Yang Chendong did not think about going around it. With firearms and cannons that were hundreds of years ahead of this era, why would he want to go around it? Sieging a city? This should be his favorite mode of war. Send down the order. The 4th Lu Division will be the vanguard, the Liaodong Division will be the left, and the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division will be the right. After the 4th Lu Division breaks through the gates of Sabashi City, the left and right cavalry will enter the city together. Those who surrender will live. Those who resist will die. After the order was sent down, close to 30,000 Five-Star Army moved out, leaving Yang Chendong's main force and surging forward. Yang Chendong, who was very confident in this battle, called over General Narasong of the Mongol Alliance Army and said, "Go and arrange for the people who are preparing to migrate to enter the city. Also move all the people who should be migrating out. If there are people who are unwilling to leave their homes, forcefully take them away. If they resist, kill without mercy. Those who are not of my race will definitely have different intentions." Yang Chendong never had much patience for other factions and races. It was best if they agreed to surrender. As long as they listened to him, he did not mind giving them a better living environment. On the other hand, if they did not want to give him face, he would kill them all. He wanted to let others know that Bugnam of Gojoseon's temper was not so good. With the order given, the Five-Star Army quickly got busy. Following behind the main force, the Land Reform Committee also sent out a small team to follow the people who were preparing to move to Sabashi City. Yang Chendong's time was limited, and he would not waste too much time in Ili. He wanted to solve the problem here as quickly as possible. Previously, when the new army passed by this place, they chose to go around it. This made the Turpan soldiers heave a sigh of relief. This time, when they saw another batch of Five-Star Army appear here, They knew that it would be hard to avoid this battle. However, under the orders of the defending general, they were prepared for battle. At the same time, smoke signals were lit up on the city walls, sending out warning signals. Chapter 1290. The current situation of the Turpan army was extremely bad, to the point of being somewhat miserable. In their own territory, they couldn't even communicate with each other. The only way to contact each other was to use smoke signals to determine whether they were in danger or not. This naturally had a lot to do with the fact that the new army was attacking everywhere. They did not focus on attacking cities, but rather on reducing the enemy's strength. The new Third Army had regiments and even battalions as units. Once they found a Turpan army, they would appear from all directions to surround and annihilate them. As time passed, the Turpan army could only hole up in their cities, not daring to take half a step out. They did not even dare to leave their cities, nor did they have the communication devices of the 5-star army. Right now, they were like fat lambs in a pen, waiting to be slaughtered. As the smoke signals rose, the city walls of Sabashi were filled with Turpan soldiers. They had even learned from the 5-star army's experience in defending Turpan, gathering the civilians who had not fled. They wanted to borrow the strength of the civilians to defend the city. However, unlike the 5-star army, they did not provide any benefits to the civilians. They were completely using the situation of grabbing able-bodied men to chase the civilians to the city walls. This method of using the civilians as cannon fodder naturally attracted the curses of the civilians. Tuashuan City wasn't a small city. It could be considered one of the most important cities in the Turpan Kingdom. However, because it was too close to the main force of the 5-star army, the Turpan soldiers had long fled. There were no civilians left in the city. The moment the 5-star army arrived, they were able to move in smoothly. The largest mansion in the city also became Yang Chendong's temporary resting place. Before the residence could be completely cleaned up, the battle report from the front lines was sent over by Wang Shan. When Yang Chendong saw the contents of 4th Master Lu's report, he couldn't help but laugh heartily. His face was filled with joy as he said, "This is really like the saying, if you don't seek death, you won't die." The Turpan soldiers are forcing the civilians like this. How can they still have the hearts of the people? Once the hearts of the people turn against us, we can save a lot of trouble by occupying this place. Beta Persei at the side also saw the telegram and nodded in agreement. That's right, it seems that the Turpan army does not treat the civilians as humans at all. This will cause the civilians to riot. They are shooting themselves in the foot. After saying this, Beta Persei had a worried look on his face. He continued, "There are so many civilians on the city walls. Are we still going to continue running?" "Of course." Yang Chendong said with an extremely confident tone. "Right now, the civilians are not our civilians. We have no obligation to ensure their safety. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for following the wrong master. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for not escaping from Supa City in time. Send an order, Division Commander De Chong. Tell him not to have any misgivings and to proceed with the original plan. In doing so, the lives of some civilians would naturally be sacrificed, but this was not in Yang Chendong's eyes. If it had to be said, he was a staunch nationalist. If the people standing on the city walls were Han civilians, he would definitely refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases. This was also the reason why Yang Xie did not directly declare war on Baiming and Nanming even though he was so powerful. However, there was no need to be polite to the foreigners. The deaths of these civilians would be blamed on the Turpan government. After the unexpected situation occurred, Division Commander De Chong had no choice but to report it, but he did not stop the work at hand. The muzzles of the cannons that should be adjusted were already in place. With his understanding of the 6th young master, just these foreigners alone would not be able to stop the 5-star army's determination to occupy this place. As expected, the order to attack according to the original plan was sent to him. Immediately, Division Commander De Chong did not hold back. He raised the red flag high and roared, "Fire!" Boom, boom, boom. In just the first round of bombardment, out of the 6 cannonballs, 2 cannonballs accurately landed on the northern city gate. The tall city gate that normally required at least 4 people to close began to tremble, as if it would break open at any moment. Second round of cannons continue. Division Commander De Chong lowered the red flag in his hand again. Immediately, another round of cannons was fired, causing the ground to tremble again. On the city walls of Suba, the cannons suddenly fell. This caused the Turpan civilians, who were originally unwilling to go up the city walls, to have a drastic change in expression. The cowardly ones had already wet their pants and sat down on the ground. Their legs were trembling, and they had no strength to stand up. Most of the civilians were like this because they had never seen such powerful cannons before. In their eyes, firecrackers were not something they could come into contact with frequently, let alone cannons that were 10,000 times more powerful. In contrast, the Turpan soldiers guarding the city were also frightened. They were not mentally prepared in this regard. When the cannons fell, especially when one of the cannons landed among them, it immediately caused dozens of casualties. Looking at the broken limbs everywhere, and the smell of blood directly assaulted their nostrils. The soldiers were all trembling, and their hands that were holding swords became weak. At this point, how could they still have the time to monitor the civilians' performance? The series of cannons completely disrupted the Turpan army's plan, and also caused their already low morale to drop to a freezing point. When another 6 cannons were fired, one of them destroyed the north gate of Suba. The Liaodong Cavalry Division and the Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division, who had been waiting for a long time, rushed in through the gate. When the battle cries rang out in all directions, the soldiers' last line of defense completely collapsed. At this moment, most of them did not fight with their weapons. Instead, they threw down the weapons in their hands and turned to flee. This was not a battle strategy of this era, and it caused their confidence to be completely destroyed. In their hearts, an indelible thought was formed. The 5-star army was not human, and could not be defeated. The 2 divisions of cavalry smoothly entered Sabashi City from the north gate. The cannons also stopped firing, but the chaos in the city did not stop. They did not expect the 5-star army to arrive in front of them so quickly, and the Turpan soldiers in the city did not make any preparations. As a result, the 5-star army cavalry charged in all directions, and unless they threw down their weapons and surrendered, they were all killed by the brave 5-star army cavalry soldiers. There was almost no resistance, and Suba was conquered by the 5-star army. They captured and injured over 10,000 enemies, and saved over 30,000 civilians. From the start of the cannons to the end, it only took 6 hours. When the news of victory reached Yang Chendong, he waved his arms and said excitedly, "There is no need to pack up anymore. We will set off now and head to Suba. At the same time, we will inform the 4th Division and the rest of the front line to continue forward. Our next target is Kunlui City." Under the lead of Commander Bai Shuang, the 1st Army understood more about the situation in the Ili region through Slam. After discussing with the 4 division commanders, they finally gave up on Dayu City and chose to charge towards Nalatu City. Under the meticulous planning, Slam introduced the grain merchants to Nalatu City. Under the same method, they took another city without any bloodshed. It could be said that their progress was extremely fast. When they were about to take the city of Telhala, the news finally leaked out. After all, this was already within the borders of the Ili Empire. Their spies were everywhere, and it was impossible for the 30,000-strong 1st Army of the Outsiders to remain completely silent. The city gates of Telhala in front of them suddenly closed, the city towers filled with soldiers. When the news reached Bai Shuangji's ears, he immediately made the decision to bring the army and the provisions he plundered from the 2 cities to attack. Just when everyone thought that a siege was about to break out, the 1st Army of the Outsiders actually took a detour around the city, leaving Telhala behind. They charged straight for the capital of Ili Empire from outside the city. The 5-star army actually appeared in his own territory, and so close to the capital. When King Baolide heard the news, he was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. He quickly called the Prime Minister Apu to discuss countermeasures. Prime Minister, the 5-star army actually appeared. This is all thanks to you. When Bao Lide saw Apu, he held his hand tightly and spoke with a grateful expression on his face. Before, Apu had suggested that the 5-star army didn't play by the rules when they fought. In order to prevent sneak attacks and sudden invasions, they should send out more scouts to keep an eye on the surrounding areas. Bao Lide didn't agree with this request from the bottom of his heart. He didn't think it was necessary. No matter how powerful the 5-star army was. Wasn't there a heavenly mountain between them? Even if the army could come over, they wouldn't be able to transport the grain. Moreover, the 5-star army still had the Turpan kingdom to deal with. What he should do now was to do his best to solve the problem in front of him, and not go around looking for trouble with them. If this wasn't Prime Minister Apu's suggestion, King Bao Lide would have directly refused. He didn't want to hurt the Prime Minister's feelings, so he reluctantly agreed, and let the Prime Minister do as he saw fit. What he didn't expect was that it was all thanks to the scouts that he sent out. Otherwise, even if the 5-star army was at his doorstep, he wouldn't know anything. Apu's expression was very heavy. He didn't look happy at all because he discovered the 5-star army ahead of time. In fact, this couldn't be considered as discovering the enemy ahead of time. They had already lost Little Yule City and Nalatu City. Their reaction was already half a beat too slow. Your Majesty, I've already received the news. The 5-star army really did come from Heavenly Mountain. They didn't bring a large amount of grain, they just attacked the city and looted it. Chapter 1291. What? How can they be so bold? King Baolida's already gloomy face became even more gloomy. He didn't say anything for a long time. Yes, their guts are too big. Why don't we just eat them? Prime Minister Ali Pu hesitated for a moment, before speaking with a solemn expression. Eat them up? Wouldn't that make us enemies with the 5-star army? King Baolida frowned. It was a pity that he was still hoping for a peaceful solution at a time like this. This was the sorrow of the weak. It was just like when the Japanese invaded China. Even though they knew that the enemy had ill intentions, they still restrained themselves. They only realized their mistake when they lost a large portion of their territory. The weak did not have any initiative on the battlefield. They were at the mercy of the enemy. Seeing that the king was still hesitating, Apu sighed and said, Your Majesty, we can't wait any longer. The 5-star army did not even give us a heads up before attacking us. If we don't send an army to surround them, I'm afraid that once the enemy's main force arrives, we won't be able to retaliate. We still need to think about it at length. How about this? We will only send people to block them. At the same time, we will order the cities to prepare their defenses and observe the situation. King Baolida was still hoping that the 5-star legion would be at a disadvantage on the main battlefield, and they would be stopped by the Turpan Kingdom's army. If this was the case, perhaps they wouldn't even need to make a move. The 5-star army would have to withdraw from this place. In this way, they would be able to obtain victory without shedding a drop of blood on their blades. Once the 5-star army retreated, they would not lose any strength. Wouldn't that be the best time to take over the Turpan and Yarkyang territories? At this moment, King Baoli was still dreaming of unifying the entire region. It was as the saying goes, a fool's dream. Apu naturally did not agree with King Baoli's words. However, he was a subject and the other party was the king. Since that was the case, he could only obey. Alright, then order the cities to defend first. Let's observe the situation first. There was one more thing that Apu didn't say. Once the ambitions of the 5-star army were exposed, the king would have no choice but to send troops to suppress them. After the two of them had a detailed discussion, the king of Baoli issued a number of orders to the generals of the major cities in Ili, telling them to exercise restraint and pay close attention to the 5-star army's movements. At the same time, they were to guard their own cities well. If it wasn't necessary, they were to not engage the 5-star army in a direct confrontation. King Baolide was satisfied. He believed that as long as he didn't provoke the other party, the 5-star army would leave if they couldn't take down the city. At the very least, his losses wouldn't be too great. On the other hand, Arab was unwilling to leave. He could clearly see how ambitious the 5-star army was. Their strength was not something a small country like Turpan could satisfy. Right now, the most important thing to do was to unite and fight against the enemy together, and not watch each other make fools of themselves and be defeated one by one. I can only persuade His Majesty next time. Let's go back. After leaving the palace, Arab sat in a sedan and headed back to the Prime Minister's residence under the protection of 20 guards. What he didn't know was that after he left this time, when he returned to this place, everything had changed. Just as Arab and his men left the palace, several pairs of eyes stared at them from a dark corner. Soon, a very small voice sounded out. The target has left the palace and is heading back to his own residence. Tell everyone to be prepared. The journey from the royal palace to the Prime Minister's residence was about 6 li. Along the way, they had to pass through a rather remote street. Here, this street was filled with dozens of black shadows. All of them only had one goal, and that was the slowly approaching palanquin. Arab sat in the sedan with his eyes closed and a worried expression on his face. The king's reaction and point of view were very different from his, and this made him very vexed. He had always believed that he was the enemy. When facing the ambitious 5-star army, it was fine if he didn't make a move, but if he did, he had to make sure that he hit the enemy with a heavy blow. Only then could he make the enemy feel pain and retreat. Although doing this might lead to the retaliation of the 5-star army, if he didn't do this, would they let him off so easily? The 5-star army's strategic intentions were very clear. They had set their sights on this piece of land and wanted to occupy it. This created an irreconcilable conflict between the two sides. Since this was the case, what difference did it make if they started the war a day earlier or a day later? If they didn't take advantage of the fact that the enemy had yet to gain a firm foothold and missed this opportunity, they might not have another chance like this in the future. No, I have to persuade His Majesty in the future that he can't be soft on the 5-star army. The enemy only has 30,000 cavalry. As long as he plans well, with the geographical advantage, it won't be difficult to mobilize 100,000 cavalry. At that time, with an absolute advantage in numbers, victory will be within reach. As he muttered to himself, several military plans began to take shape in Apal's mind. Clang, clang. The palanquin suddenly fell to the ground without any warning. Alipu, who was deep in thought, lost his balance and nearly fell out of the palanquin. The sudden change caused his expression to change. He immediately shouted angrily, "What's going on?" Although Apal's temperament was good, and he took good care of the people around him, anyone would be angry after being tossed around like this. He was also an exception. After shouting angrily, he wanted to lift the palanquin to check. But before he could do anything, the palanquin's curtains opened from the outside, and a very unfamiliar face appeared. After carefully sizing up the shocked Apu, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "That's right. We can verify his identity now. Take him away." What did he mean by verifying his identity? Apal didn't quite understand, but he knew it wasn't anything good. When he thought of the fact that he was in the middle of the city and there should be soldiers patrolling around, he wanted to shout loudly to attract more people. But his actions were already under the eyes of the stranger. He saw an arm coming at him through the air, then his neck stiffened. His body fell to the side and he lost consciousness. Just like that, Prime Minister Apal was taken away. More than an hour later, a group of patrolling soldiers passed by and saw the sedan. After confirming that it belonged to the Prime Minister, they immediately sent people to investigate. It didn't take long for the news of Prime Minister Apal's disappearance to reach the palace. Soon King Baolide's shouts could be heard. "Find him! Find him even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground." These shouts caused the generals who came to report to tremble and complain inwardly. But if they knew that Apal had already been sent out of the capital by the intelligence department, they wouldn't be complaining, they would be crying for help. Soon, the news reached the ears of Yang Qindong, who was on his way to Kunlo City. His expression didn't change, and he said in a thick voice, "Understood, tell Chuisho to protect Apal's safety. This person is very useful." This matter was arranged by Yang Qindong. To be able to become a famous prime minister, there are many records in history. Such a person, Yang Qindong has a lot of scruples in his heart. Of course, he wouldn't underestimate such an opponent, so he sent Chuisho to lead ninjas to carry out the kidnapping plan. The operation code was called Needle Extraction. Sure enough, they didn't disappoint. The ninjas who dared to fully submit to the Prime Minister were able to do such a thing without anyone noticing. After contacting the local situation team, they quickly made a targeted plan. A burst of poisonous smoke was scattered, and the whole operation didn't cause any commotion. Without Apol's protection, it was like a bird that lost a wing. The threat it posed was greatly reduced. This also created more opportunities for Bai Shuang's First Army's military plan. For example, after receiving the king's order, the cities of the Ili Empire were all in a state of self-defense. Their gates were tightly closed, and they looked like they were on the verge of death. But what they didn't know was that Shuangbai never intended to attack a city. Even when he took over Little Yule City, it was only to replenish his food supplies. Their main task was to cause destruction, to disrupt the social order of the Ili Empire, and to attack their strength. Some large cities have the help of their gates, which can be closed for defense. But some villages and towns can't, and these places became the targets of the First Army. They rode fast horses and rushed into the houses of large families, but whenever they encountered resistance, they would kill without mercy. After creating one bloody case after another, they would even open the granaries of the rich families. Apart from taking away some of the things that they needed, they would leave the rest untouched, allowing the wind to blow on them, allowing the sun to shine on them, and allowing the ordinary people around to spy on them. At first, the commoners were afraid of the power of these large families, so they didn't dare act rashly. But 1 day passed, 2 days passed, and some of the more daring people entered the manor. When they saw the ground covered in corpses, the fear in their hearts disappeared, and the piles of food that had already been opened up were quickly snatched clean by these people. This happened once, and when this happened frequently, and the large family's food was exposed to the commoners again and again, they no longer hesitated, nor would they wait for a day or two. They only needed to see the 5-star Army's cavalry leave, and then they would take action to snatch. The news that they could fill their stomachs quickly spread like the wind, to the extent that in some places, before the 5-star Army appeared, some of the more daring commoners gathered together and charged into the large families, killing people and giving out food, and in the end, shifting the blame to the 5-star Army. Chapter 1292. To be able to store so much food at home in a year of famine, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was rich and heartless. If such a person died, then so be it, there was nothing to feel pity about. As for shifting the blame to the 5-star Army, Bai Shuang didn't really care. These people's actions had indirectly helped him, expanding the reputation of the 5-star Army, so why not? Bai Shuang clearly remembered that his teacher Yang Qindong had said more than once that the existence of social class was the greatest restriction to the 5-star Army in Yangxia. This was especially true for some of the nobles. Although the dynasties changed frequently, they would never fall. People like this who only cared about their own interests and had no loyalty to the current dynasty would often become new meritorious officials of a new dynasty. There was nothing wrong with killing such people who had no ruler, no country, and no father. Only by killing all of these people would the 5-star Army have a better chance of conquering and controlling the land. Not only that, if they did it well, they would gain the support of the commoners. In comparison, the commoners were the ones who suffered the most. They had been oppressed by these nobles for who knew how many years. Some of them had been oppressed since their ancestors, so it was impossible for them to not be angry. The only reason why they didn't say anything was because they were too cowardly and didn't have enough strength. Since it was like this, the 5-star Army could help them and be the leader. Reality proved that this was indeed quite effective. This was because in many places, especially the commoners who had been oppressed by the nobles, began to look forward to the arrival of the 5-star Army. Some of the more far-sighted ones had already brought their travel expenses with them to find the 5-star Army and join them. Their many years of life experience told them that only the 5-star Army could save them. Only the 5-star Army could help them change their lives. Bai Shuang fully understood his teacher Yang Qindong's philosophy, and did as he was told. The result was that not only did the strength of the foreign race's first army not decrease, it was instead continuously expanding. As for the young and strong civilians who wanted to join the army, he accepted them all and organized them into the 4 divisions under his command. With the presence of these people, they would be more familiar with and understand the surrounding environment. Some of the following military battle plans would also be better supplemented and perfected. The effect was so good that Yang Chendong had never thought of it before. Compared to the First Army, the progress of the new 5 armies was also very smooth. Even though they didn't recruit the local commoners as soldiers, because there was a RAF who understood the Yirkiang tribe extremely well, this captured general completely stood on the side of the 5-star army. Based on his understanding of the Yirkiang tribe, the new 5-star army could often achieve twice the results with half the effort. Their entry also gave King Agudemu a huge headache. Unlike King Baelide, the Yarkiang's King Agudemu chose to fight head-on. He had sent out 100,000 cavalrymen to search for the main force of the new 5-star army, and wanted to have a decisive battle with them. In his mind, this was his territory, and he had the advantage in terms of timing, location, and manpower. He also had a huge advantage in terms of military strength. Why couldn't he deal a heavy blow to the 5-star army and win a huge victory? However, how could Commander Shirwan Shan, who fully followed Yang Chendong's orders, do as he wished? He was originally a general of the Great Ming Dynasty, and had a deep understanding of Sun Tzu's art of war. Based on Araf's introduction of the situation, he and his opponent started to engage in guerrilla warfare. For a moment, both sides were fighting back and forth, and neither side had a clear winner. Compared to the First Army and the new 5-star army, the new army led by Su He quickly encountered a huge nail. He continuously bypassed many important cities, and arrived at the Iron Gate Pass to attack the rear of the Turkopan kingdom. At that moment, 100,000 cavalrymen were rushing towards their location. They were the reinforcements sent by the Kazakh Empire to support the 3 countries. The general leading them was still Janibek Khan's younger brother, Keliai. Last time, he had brought 80,000 soldiers, and lost 30,000 of them. This made him feel extremely ashamed. This time, when he set out for the second time, he had already made a decision. He had also fully absorbed the experience of the previous battle. He wanted to lead the army alone. Keliai had always believed that his previous defeat wasn't because he was inferior to the 5-star army, but because his allies weren't strong enough. As the saying goes, don't fear a godlike opponent, but fear a pig-like opponent. This was what he thought. This time, he didn't inform anyone that he was leading an army of 100,000. He also didn't have any intention of joining forces with any country. Apart from contacting them when he needed provisions, he spent the rest of his time traveling alone. He wanted to find the main force of the 5-star army and have a decisive battle with them. The heavens seemed to know what he was thinking and gave him a chance. When he learned from the scouts that there was a 30,000-strong 5-star army just 150 li away from them, he became extremely excited. Good, very good. Pass down the order for the army to speed up. We must surround the 30,000 5-star army. When moving behind the enemy lines, without enough information, it was easy to fall into danger. Su He felt a great amount of pressure. The number of scouts he sent out was sufficient, and the distance they covered was far enough. This was the reason why he didn't lose. With the existence of these excellent scouts, the moment the 100,000 Kazakh Empire troops appeared 100 li away, the news was sent back. When he learned that the enemy had 100,000 cavalrymen, the first thing Su He did wasn't to run away, but to calm down and consider whether or not he could take down these 100,000 soldiers. 30,000 against 100,000, and he still wanted to take down the enemy. This was no different from a snake trying to swallow an elephant. In the eyes of others, this was overestimating one's capabilities. However, in the eyes of Su He and his new army, this really wasn't an impossible task. It was because of the 3 armies sent to attack the enemy's rear. His new army was the closest to Yang Chendong's main force, as well as the one with the highest chance of receiving assistance in the shortest amount of time. Send a report to the 6th young master. Tell him about the situation here, Tell him about our plans to take down the enemy and our battle plan." After just a stick of incense's time, Suhi made his decision. He wanted to create a miracle. The messenger quickly left after receiving the order. Suhi then said to the 4 division commanders at his side, "Inform the soldiers to rest here. We need to recover our strength in preparation for the great battle." When he saw how confident Suhi was, the 4th Cavalry Division's Commander Chang Bo couldn't help but feel worried. "Military commander, will the king agree to our request?" These words attracted the attention of the other 3 division commanders. It was clear that this was also a question they were concerned about. However, Suhi's expression didn't seem to care as he said, "If the 6th young master agrees, then we'll fight this battle well. If he doesn't agree, then we'll retreat. It's just a moment of rest." Suhi's meaning was extremely clear. He wasn't sure if Yang Chendong would agree, so he made 2 preparations. Would Yang Chendong agree? When the telegram was sent, he didn't immediately give an answer. Instead, he stared at the telegram for a long time. The Kazakh Empire and the Aries Dynasty had sent a total of 250,000 cavalrymen to aid the Middle Kingdom. He had already received the news from the intelligence department. Yang Chendong welcomed their troops because it gave him an excuse to invade the 2 countries. Just like when he entered the Ili region, didn't he also say that he wanted to take revenge? Even though the matter of Ili sending troops had happened a long time ago, this excuse was a bit forced. But even if it was an excuse, who cared if it was prudent or not? And now these 2 countries had given him a legitimate reason. Of course, it couldn't be any better. However, it was still 250,000 cavalrymen after all. How could it be so easy to deal with them? Yang Chendong did not have enough preparation to deal with them, nor did he know what kind of environment and conditions to fight them. On the battlefield, opportunities were constantly changing. Many sudden events didn't give you time to prepare. Now the opportunity had come. The new army wanted to fight 100,000 Kazakh cavalry. What he had to do was agree or disagree. If he agreed, then it was just a question of who to send as reinforcements. Yang Chendong wasn't so arrogant as to think that the new army could stop 100,000 Kazakh cavalry with only 30,000 people. But what if he sent some reinforcements? "Come, call Tian Hu and Ling Daqiang over." On the battlefield, the 1st Cavalry Division had no place to be used. They were only brought along to guard against sudden events. Now that the opportunity had appeared, it couldn't be better to send this army. As for the 4th Infantry Division, when sieging the city, they didn't need a division's strength. 1 regiment was enough. The remaining 3 regiments could also be sent to support the new army. In this way, even though their military strength wasn't as good as the enemy's, in terms of military strength, it wasn't wrong to say that they surpassed the enemy's. In particular, the 3 regiments of the Cold Front were fully equipped with firearms. Once they were sent out, they would definitely have an unexpected effect. Arriving in front of the sand table, after a serious and careful search, Yang Chendong determined the battlefield. He waved his right hand and smashed the sand table at the location of Batian Mound. His eyes flashed with an intimidating light. Batian Mound was located on the west side of Boston Lake. On both sides of the lake were tall mountains. It stretched for more than 20 kilometers, and was a good place to set up an ambush. Choosing the battlefield here could achieve the effect of heavily injuring the 100,000 Kazakh cavalry. At that time, they could use the method of blocking the head, cutting the waist, and cutting the tail to maximize the results of the battle and establish the 5-star army's chances of victory. In order to achieve the best results, Yang Chendong decided to personally lead the troops into battle. The battle involved the 4th Infantry Division, the entire World Cavalry Division, and the entire new army. In order to fully display the advantages of these units and ensure that they cooperated well, Yang Chendong had to personally lead them. Very quickly, Tian Hu and Ling Daqiang came in front of Yang Chendong and told him his thoughts. As for the ambush location and the ambush of the Kazakh army, both Tian Hu and Ling Daqiang had no objections. They were clear that once the 100,000 Kazakh cavalry entered the battlefield, it could disrupt the military plans of the army and cause a lot of trouble. However, to achieve the effect of this ambush, And for the military plans to be completed smoothly, there was another point that couldn't be ignored. That was whether or not the Turpan army would send out their troops. Chapter 1293. If the Turpan army were to send troops to assist the Kazakh army, or to help them intercept the Kazakh army, then what they would have to face would not only be 100,000 enemy cavalry, but even more. If that was the case, whether or not they could smoothly win this battle would be full of suspense. When the two division commanders raised their concerns, Yang Chendong confidently waved his hand. No, that won't happen. Kelly is a very conceited person. Last time, he lost to us, so he won't accept it. This time, he has the opportunity to fight with us alone, so he won't lightly ask for help from the Turpan army. Besides, unless it is necessary, he won't be willing to share such a big merit with others. You can rest assured about this. Of course, if the battle doesn't reach a state where we can kill them in one blow, then no one knows what will happen. This requires us to appear outside the ambush area on time. As long as we can do this and trap the enemy in Tianbo Mound, then even if they ask for help, it will be too late. Yang Chendong deeply understood the principle of knowing oneself, and knowing one's enemy to be victorious in 100 battles. Often, when facing an army, the attitude of the enemy's general would determine the final direction of the battle. It could be said that he had studied Kelly thoroughly, which was why he could say these words so confidently. Seeing the sixth young master so confident, Tian Hu and Ling Daqiang looked at each other and nodded. In their view, even if there was an accident in the battle and Kelly asked for help from the Turpan army, with their ability, they could just retreat. Would they really be surrounded? After the three of them discussed for a while, they came up with a final strategy. Then, the two generals left the tent to count the troops. Yang Chendong also called Beta Persei and asked him to gather 2,000 black cavalry to prepare to fight with the 4th Division. At the same time, he also asked Wang Shan to send a telegram to the new army commander Su He, ordering him to lure the enemy in and lead the Kazakh cavalry into Tianbo Mound and into the ambush area. With a single order, the army began to get busy. In order to not alert the enemy, Yang Chendong ordered the remaining troops to continue towards Kuanlai city and attack the city according to the plan to attract the enemy's attention. Meanwhile, he himself led the Black Cavalry Dragon Guards and the main force of the 4th Division to leave the official road and head towards Botian Mound. The location of the ambush had been determined, and the next thing to do was to reach the location within the specified time. This would determine the success or failure of this battle. Therefore, after leaving the official road, Yang Chendong and the Black Cavalry rode fast horses and galloped with the main force of the 4th Division. In order to reach their destination on time, the soldiers of the 4th Army Division traveled light. They didn't bring anything they didn't need to ensure their speed. It was the same for the Black Knights and Dragon Guards. Each of them was given 3 strong horses. After a while, they would change horses to ensure that they maintain the same speed as they reached their destination. At the same time, the new army commander Su He received the order. After seeing Yang Chendong's telegram, he called the 4 division commanders over. First, he found the location of Tianbo Mound on the sand table, and then read out the military order. Everyone, this time, the 6th young master will personally lead the troops into battle. Our new army's opportunity to show off has come. Now I announce that the task of luring the enemy will be handed over to Su. He didn't immediately make a decision. Instead, he looked at the 4 division commanders one by one. Feeling Su He's gaze, the 4 division commanders tried their best to raise their heads, showing their determination to fight. The task will be handed over to the 1st Cavalry Division. Division Commander Ku, is there a problem? In the end, his gaze fell on Division Commander Bai Kai. The 4 division commanders of the new army were all brave and fierce. On the battlefield, they were all experts on horseback, but at the same time, they all had their own specialties. But in terms of commanding ability, Kulu, who almost became a division commander, was better. This person was good at coordinating the overall situation, especially when it came to defense. Giving this task to him was the most reassuring. Kulu's body tensed up when his name was called. He knew that this was the division commander's way of giving him a chance to perform. Previously, because he helped the First Army's former division commander, Sukuda, hide military intelligence, he was given a warning, and because of that he lost the chance to become a division commander. Now that the opportunity had appeared in front of him again, he immediately replied loudly, "Yes, I promise to complete the task." It's good to have confidence, but this time, you're using a division to lure 100,000 soldiers. In order to not let them see anything, the other 3 divisions must retreat and not give you any help. It can be said that the success or failure of this battle will all depend on you. Do you understand the importance of this task? After all, this was not a small matter. It involved the victory or defeat of nearly 200,000 soldiers. So he had no choice but to remind Kulu. This subordinate understands. Division commander, please rest assured. If this task is not completed, I will bring my head to see you. Kulu naturally knew the difficulty of this task, but he was not afraid. He believed in the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division. He also believed that as long as the preparations were done well, the task would definitely be completed. Good. What he needed was Kulu's determination. So he nodded with satisfaction. Then he ordered the other 3 divisions to raise their flags and pretend to retreat in a sorry state. Of course, this was to let the Kazakh cavalry see. This was also the only thing he could do for Kulu's 1st Cavalry Division. After that, the 3 divisions of the new army's main force ran away. In order to make it seem more realistic, Suhi ordered the troops to throw away some of their equipment after a certain distance. This made it seem like they were retreating in a hurry and fleeing in a sorry state. Only by doing this could they lure the enemy's army into an ambush circle. This action of the new army was quickly discovered by the Kazakh cavalry scouts. One by one, they reported it to General Kelly, causing him to laugh uncontrollably. Good, it seems like our sudden appearance has indeed caught the 5-star army off guard. Very good, order the army to speed up and catch up to the 5-star army. Then we'll eat them up. After Kelly returned to Kazakh after his defeat, although his brother Janibek Khan did not blame him, he still felt very uncomfortable in his heart. Especially the unwillingness in his heart. From the beginning to the end, he did not have a chance to properly fight with the 5-star army. This made him feel even more unjust. If it was a fair battle and he lost, then there was nothing to say. However, losing to an ally was something that he could not accept. This time, he brought another 100,000 troops to battle. He had thought it through and decided that he must have a fair battle with the 5-star army. He wanted to let the enemy know the power of the Kazakh cavalry. Kelly happily gave the order. His deputy, who was personally placed in the army by Janibek Khan, narrowed his eyes and stepped out. "General, should we send a message to the king of Turpan and ask him to cooperate with us to block the 5-star army's escape route?" Hearing this suggestion, Kelly did not immediately reply. Instead, he fell into deep thought. Of course, he knew that blocking the 2 sides was much more effective than chasing after them alone. However, deep in his bones he did not trust these allies. He did not want to share this great merit with others. If the Turpan army appeared and blocked the 5-star army's escape route, then he would be very unwilling to share the merit with others. After thinking about it again and again, he decided to give it a try. If it really did not work, then he would send someone to inform the Turpan army. Furthermore, he had 100,000 soldiers and the enemy only had 30,000 cavalry. No matter how he looked at it, there was no possibility of him losing. Kelly was just like Yang Chendong. He did not inform the Turpan army of the situation. This was also his fate. This would also become the most regretful thing in his life. After making up his mind, Kelly ordered General Porta to be the vanguard and move quickly. The order he gave was to quickly chase after the escaping 5-star army and viciously bite their tails. It would be best if they could tangle with them and create enough time and opportunity for the main force to arrive and form an encirclement. Porta was also a famous general in Kazakh. After receiving the order, he immediately ordered 10,000 cavalrymen and 3 days' worth of rations to leave the barracks and run in the direction of the new army's escape route. To be appointed as the vanguard general, Porta was very ambitious. He wanted to achieve the greatest merit to prove his ability. However, this raging fire was quickly extinguished. Just as he was about to reach a valley after forcefully marching for 100 miles, countless arrows suddenly flew out from both sides of the road. His vanguard of 1,000 cavalrymen quickly suffered heavy losses. In the end, only 200 to 300 of them managed to escape. They had a bad start. When Porta heard the news, he was very angry. He angrily scolded the vanguard general for being incompetent and cowardly. Then he personally led 3,000 cavalrymen to the front. As expected, as soon as they arrived, they were attacked by arrows. However, Porta was prepared and quickly launched a counterattack. He ordered his cavalrymen to split into 2 groups and rush to the high ground on both sides. Under Porta's command, the 3,000 cavalrymen rushed through the waves of arrows and rushed to the top of the valley, which was more than 20 meters high. The 2,000 five-star army that were lying in ambush here kept retreating. Many bows and quivers were thrown all over the ground, and the few warhorses were abandoned as well. Ha ha! Seeing the result of this battle and the 5-star soldiers rushing into the dense forest in the distance, Boda threw his head back and laughed heartily to release the joy in his heart. However, he did not notice that although they had captured a lot, they did not leave behind a single 5-star army soldier. However, at this moment, he was completely enjoying the feeling of victory. Everything else had already been thrown to the back of his mind. Do you see that? This is the powerful 5-star army that people have been talking about. Come on, let's continue forward. Porta was happy and the vanguard continued to move forward. Chapter 1294. After another 5 kilometers, another wave of arrows arrived. But this time, the Kazakh cavalry were prepared and did not panic. Other than a few dozen who were injured by the first wave of arrows, the rest of the cavalry quickly rushed up the canyon and chased away the 5-star army. After 2 consecutive victories, the Kazakh army's morale was greatly boosted and their speed seemed to have increased a lot. However, after 5 kilometers, another wave of arrows came, forcing them to slow down their pace. Because of this, there were a total of 5 waves of arrows by the time the sky turned dark. The distance of the attacks had also changed from once every 10 miles to once every 5 miles. Fortunately, this kind of attack did not cause too much damage to the Kazakh vanguard. The total number of Kazakh cavalry was less than 1,000. This was also because they lost 600 to 700 cavalry in the first wave. Considering that it was dark and difficult to see, Boda had to order the army to stop and rest in order to avoid falling into the enemy's trap. Boda, who was lying in the temporary tent, had a face full of excitement. Today he had repelled 5 waves of attacks from the 5-star army and obtained 2,000 sets of bows. This was an amazing achievement. With such a satisfied smile on her face, the busty woman slept all the way until dawn. What made him feel a little regretful was that the 5-star army did not come to harass him that night. This made the 4,000 cavalry that he had hidden outside the camp not come in handy, which was somewhat disappointing. But did this mean that the 5-star army did not have the ability to ambush him, and that they had already left? General Boda, who possessed the spirit of AQ, gave the order to advance at full speed after breakfast. After walking for a full 20 miles, they did not encounter any harassment or attacks. This made Boda even more certain that the 5 astral legions had escaped. Now he could finally let go of his hands and feet and advance at full speed. Not long after his order was issued, the army's formation began to scatter after advancing for more than 3 kilometers. The arrow attacks that had disappeared for a while appeared again. The attacks from the bows and arrows in the dense forest were even more intense than before. In just one wave of attacks, over 100 riders were hit by the arrows. Cries of pain and curses rose and fell one after another. The sudden counterattack was completely unexpected, and the Kazakh cavalry who had already lowered their vigilance suffered a great loss. What was even more frightening was that after the 2 waves of arrows were fired, the 5-star army still charged forward, brandishing their sabers as they charged into the enemy's ranks. Immediately, streams of blood splattered out, dyeing the 5-star army's armor red. Don't panic, counterattack, counterattack. Seeing soldiers falling off their horses, Boda roared and led the cavalry around him in a counterattack. However, the 5-star army's cavalry came quickly and left even faster. They didn't give Porta a chance to counterattack and disappeared into the dense forest on both sides. By the time Sark's army arrived, they had already disappeared. This was clearly a premeditated attack. With the mentality of running after one shot, they came and went without a trace. After they left, General Boda sadly discovered that in just half an hour, he had lost over 1,000 cavalrymen, and the number of injured soldiers had increased by nearly 1,000. This kind of loss was a huge blow to General Boda. They hadn't even engaged the enemy yet, but they had already lost nearly 30% of their strength. This made him have no choice but to be vigilant and send as many scouts as possible into the dense forest to ensure the safety of the vanguard. The advantage of doing this was that the possibility of a surprise attack was very small, but because of this, the marching speed of the army had to be slowed down. 15 miles away, the commander of the new army's 1st Cavalry Division, Kalu, was waiting for news with the main force. After seeing the 1st Regiment return, Kalu couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief, especially when he saw the smell of blood on the returning soldiers. He knew that the harvest was not small. Division Master, according to the mission, the scouts have reported that the enemy has already slowed down their marching pace. The Tan commander Wu Ba chuckled, his face full of pride. In this battle, he had led 2,000 cavalrymen and achieved a 1:1 ratio of casualties. On the other hand, he had lost less than 50 cavalrymen. This result could be said to be perfect. Hearing Wu Ba's report, Kalu nodded with satisfaction. Very good. This time, your 1st regiment will be given a merit. Next, we will continue to harass them. In short, we must delay the enemy's advance. 80 miles behind us is Botian Mound. That will be the end of our retreat. There were still 3 days before the main force would complete the encirclement. In other words, he had to hold on for 3 more days. A distance of 80 miles could be covered in just a few hours for elite cavalrymen. One could imagine how much pressure he was under. As the regiment commander, Wu Ba naturally knew about their 1st Cavalry Division's mission. The complacent expression on his face immediately vanished. Don't worry, division leader. We will definitely complete the mission. Even if we have to sacrifice all of our brothers, we will still hold on for 3 days. That's right. This time, even if all of our 1st Cavalry Division dies, we will not let the enemy pass through Botian Mound. Commander Kalu, who had always advocated for the smallest price to obtain the greatest victory, also changed his style at this moment. He was ready to go all out. If it was said that the loss of the 1st Cavalry Division would be able to kill 100,000 Kazakh cavalrymen, it would be worth it no matter how one looked at it. When Kalu received this mission, he knew that this was going to be a fierce battle. Although he did not like this way of fighting, as a soldier, it was his duty to obey orders. For the greatest victory. So what if the 1st Cavalry Division lost their lives here? General Boda naturally did not know Kalu's plan. Because of the repeated attacks, he became more cautious. When the army advanced, the distance between the cavalrymen became closer. In addition, the number of scouts increased. Although the 5-star army would occasionally appear to harass the enemy, most of them were repelled by General Boda. The army did not suffer any losses. The price of this was that the marching speed of the army was very slow, to the point that by noon the next day, General Kelly had already caught up to them with the main force. After seeing the vanguard moving so slowly, Kelly was naturally dissatisfied. He had a guard call Boda over and scolded him. Boda also knew that the marching speed was too slow, so he did not say anything. When he saw that Kelly was tired of scolding, he made his request. He needed more cavalry. Only by increasing the number of scouts could the army advance faster. Kelly still valued Boda very much. Otherwise, he would not have arranged for him to be the vanguard general. Since Boda said so, he naturally had his own considerations and difficulties. Kelly quickly agreed to this request. He immediately assigned 5,000 cavalrymen to the vanguard as scouts. With the addition of these new cavalrymen, whenever there was a dense forest on both sides of the road, groups of cavalrymen would rush into it, looking for any unsafe factors. It was also because of this action that several companies of the 5-star army that had been lying in ambush were discovered. Among them, one company was a little slow in retreating and was surrounded by these Kazakh cavalry scouts. After an hour of bitter battle, the company was completely wiped out. When the news reached the ears of Division Commander Kalu, his face became very serious. There were still 2 days before the main force could complete the encirclement. The speed and reaction of the Kazakh cavalry far exceeded his expectations. If he did not send out the main force, he was afraid that they would not be able to last until then. Order the 2nd Regiment to attack in units. In short, the main task is to delay the enemy's advance. If we can fight, then we can. If we can delay, then we can. Kalu gave the order with a pained expression. When he saw the 2nd Regiment commander leading the soldiers of the 2nd Regiment away, his eyes were filled with tears. He was very clear in his heart that it would be good if 20% of the soldiers came back. They are all heroes. Gazing at the departing figures of the 2nd Regiment, the 1st Regiment commander Wu Ba also spoke like this. Then, when he turned around to look at Kalu, he stood at attention and said, "Senior Commander, the 1st Regiment requests permission to attack after the 2nd Regiment." "No. The 1st Regiment will stay behind and fight for the last time." Kalu shook his head. In terms of fighting strength, the 1st Regiment was naturally the strongest. Since that was the case, the best steel should be used on the edge of the blade. When the time came, he and the 1st Regiment would be the last barrier to stop the Kazakh army from advancing. Time passed by minute. The 3rd Regiment of the 4th Regiment and the 2,000 Black Cavalry led by Yang Chendong had arrived at the designated location 3 hours earlier than planned. From their point of view, they could faintly hear the sounds of killing from time to time. "Young master, our soldiers have found suitable places to hide." Beta Persei returned to Yang Chendong's side after patrolling the army. At the same time, he reported to Yang Chendong with a trace of worry on his face. Yang Chendong knew what Beta Persei was worried about. Not long ago, the commander of the new army, Suhi, sent a telegram. After they got rid of the scouts sent by the Kazakh army, they were now rushing to the exit of Batian Mound. In other words, the main force of the new army had not arrived yet. Now only the 1st Cavalry Division, who had stayed here in advance, could fight the enemy. A division of only 8,000 people, but they had to stop 100,000 iron cavalry. One could imagine how difficult this task was. Even if Beta Persei led the team, he could not guarantee that they would be able to complete the task. After Yang Chendong heard the report, his expression did not change. He put away the military binoculars in his hand and said without turning his head, "Go and ask where the 1st Cavalry Division is and how long it will take to reach the designated location." Chapter 1295. "Yes, I'll go right away." Beta Persei agreed and rushed to Wang Shan's telegram team. Yang Chendong, who was left behind, slowly turned around and sighed softly. How could he not know what kind of pressure the new army's 1st Cavalry Division was facing at this time? It was even possible that the entire division would be wiped out if they were not careful. But this was war, a war of blood and iron. It was either you die or I die. Anyone who was in the middle of it, if they showed even the slightest bit of mercy, they might cause the army to be doomed eternally. As the saying goes, the merciful cannot command an army. To achieve one's goal, there must be sacrifices. As long as the sacrifice was worth it, someone must do it. No matter how reluctant he was, he had to harden his heart. He had to be willing to give up. Only by giving up could he gain something. He saw this point very clearly, and was also very rational. Now he only hoped that the 1st Cavalry Division could arrive at the designated location as soon as possible. This way, the pressure on the new army's 1st Cavalry Division should be much less. The 1st Cavalry Division was indeed the trump card of the cavalry. Under the leadership of Division Commander Tian, who, they had been hurrying on their way ever since they received the mission. During this period, many warhorses fell to the side of the road due to exhaustion, foaming at the mouth, but Tian, who still did not order the troops to slow down. He only left a company of soldiers to take care of these meritorious warhorses. The main force of the division was still moving forward bravely. After several days of continuous travel, Even the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division, who were regarded as the most elite and powerful existence among the cavalry, still had many soldiers whose legs were worn out and blood flowed down their trousers. There were also some soldiers who did not get any rest for a long time. They fell asleep while sitting on their war horses. Some even fell off their horses because they could not hold the reins and were injured. There were casualties at any time. But no matter what happened, Tian Hu did not ask them to stop even once. Even if they had to eat, he asked the soldiers to eat on horseback. It was only at this time that the war horses would slow down from their galloping state. But even so, the cavalry soldiers were still a bit faster than the other cavalry units. After a few days of non-stop travel, they finally arrived at the designated ambush location. At this moment, they were 8 hours ahead of schedule. This half a day's time was bought with the lives of the brave warriors of the 1st Cavalry Division. According to the statistics, out of the 20,000 people in the division, the number of non-combat casualties during the march had reached 2,000. They were the world's #1 cavalry division. Every soldier who could enter this place was carefully selected. Even so, the losses they suffered were so great. It could be imagined that this operation was clearly not a mission, but a race against time and life. As soon as they entered battle position, the transmitter immediately reported the news to Yang Chendong through the radio. After hearing the news, Yang Chendong, who always had a cold expression on the battlefield, couldn't help but exclaim loudly, "Good, the soldiers are all good. After this battle, all of you will have meritorious service. Now it is time for us to attack. Inform the new army and the 1st Cavalry Division that we will launch an all-out attack in half an hour. We must annihilate the enemy." Within the long and narrow Batian Mound Canyon, the battle was currently in full swing. The smell of blood filled everyone's nostrils. Blood could be seen everywhere, dyeing the ground red. The Kazakh army's performance was far more ferocious than Division Commander Kulu had expected. They seemed to have already seen through the 5-star army's intention to stop them. As soon as they entered the canyon, they launched a frenzied attack. As if frightened by the tall mountains and boulders on both sides of the road, General Kelly continuously sent reinforcements to the vanguard, striving to leave this place as quickly as possible, rushing out of this dangerous place that he felt was far from good. During this period of time, General Kelly did hesitate. After looking at the surrounding terrain, he discovered that this was a very good place to set up an ambush. He thought of ordering the army to retreat. Since there was the 5-star army blocking the way, they could just retreat from here. However, when he considered the fact that there were carriages carrying provisions and supplies behind them, it would be easy for the cavalry to turn around. However, it wouldn't be so easy for the supply carriages to turn around. If they rashly moved forward, the army would be in chaos and a scene of internal strife would occur. At that time, if the 5-star army came from behind, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yesterday, the scouts also sent news that they didn't discover any 5-star army's main force. I think my worries were unnecessary. Kelly comforted himself like this. At the same time, he had a trace of hope in his heart. He also gave the vanguard General Boda a death order. Within 4 hours, they had to open this passage and let the army smoothly pass through here. For this, he added another 10,000 soldiers to the vanguard. Boda, who had the authority to command more troops, had his morale greatly boosted. Under his command, he led the cavalry to charge forward fiercely and quickly wiped out the main force of the new army's 1st Cavalry Division. After a series of battles, the exit of the canyon was right in front of them. Hope was right in front of them. The 1st Cavalry Division, who fought with all their might, couldn't stop themselves from retreating. During this time, Kulu, who was the division commander, also pulled out his saber and joined the battle. Even the direct subordinate battalion of the 1st Cavalry Division charged forward. It was precisely because Kulu had suppressed the last of his strength that he was able to save the life of the 1st Regiment commander, Wu Ba, allowing this regiment commander who had already fainted to be pulled back from the battlefield. However, at this time, there were less than 500 cavalrymen left. In a short 2 days, the 1st Cavalry Division went from a full strength of 8,400 men to less than 1,000 men. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were almost completely wiped out. This result was far more tragic than what Kalu had imagined. Kalu, who was wearing a white battle robe that was now dyed red, turned his wrist and looked at the military watch that the sixth young master had personally given to him. His face was gloomy. There were still 14 hours until the appointed time, but the soldiers in his hands were almost exhausted. Perhaps in the next charge, the entire army would be wiped out. He might also die on the battlefield like the majority of the soldiers, wrapped in horse hide. If he were to die on the battlefield, Kalu had already mentally prepared himself for this from the day he joined the 5-star army. However, he really couldn't accept dying like this. He still hadn't completed his mission. Once the Kazakh army charged out of the canyon behind them, all of the plans that Yang Chendong had made before would become useless. The soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division would also die in vain. This was something that he absolutely couldn't accept. Fight, no matter what, we have to hold on for 16 hours. Kalu used his blood-soaked battle robe to wipe the glowing white saber in his hand. His face flashed with a resolute expression. There were less than 1,000 cavalrymen around him. Most of them were injured, and some of them were even seriously injured. They were still bleeding. However, at this moment, no one doubted his words. They firmly believed that as long as they were still alive, they wouldn't allow any enemy to charge out. Kalu arranged for 2 bodyguards to send the unconscious Wu Ba away. This could be considered the last bloodline that he left for the 1st Cavalry Division. Then he looked up at the sky. It was currently noon. The sun hung high in the sky, emitting a gentle warmth. The sunlight shone on every soldier's body. Kill. After the Kazakh army reorganized the cavalry, they once again charged forward. This time, General Boda personally led the charge. This showed that they were determined to solve this problem in one battle. The battle cries of the opposing cavalry resounded throughout the canyon. Looking from afar, sand and dust filled the sky. There were probably more than 10,000 cavalrymen. Some people said that when there were more than 10,000 cavalrymen, there was no end to them. At this moment, Kalu and the less than 1,000 cavalrymen of the 1st Cavalry Division felt that way. It was like a ferocious beast with its mouth wide open. It made people feel fearful. At this moment, no matter if it was Kalu, the division commander, or the soldiers, their faces didn't change. It was as if they didn't see the approaching danger. Every soldier only tightly gripped the saber in their hands, looking as if they were facing death with equanimity. For the soldiers who had already disregarded life and death, and even had the heart to die, there was no difference whether there were 1,000 or 10,000 enemies. They only knew that they had to use the last of their strength to block the enemy until they were killed and couldn't move anymore. Everyone, hold your sabers and prepare to charge with me. The target was constantly approaching. When it was less than 3 li away, Kalu also raised the sharp saber in his hand, looking like a moth flying into a flame. Kill. The remaining less than 1,000 cavalrymen also raised their sabers at this moment. Every one of them had a serious expression and didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Just as Kalu's saber was about to fall from the air and slash down, a loud bugle suddenly sounded, resounding in the ears of every soldier of the 1st Cavalry Division. This is the retreat signal. Kalu instantly reacted when he heard the bugle. Then he immediately turned to look at the 2 remaining bugle masters of the 1st Cavalry Division. After confirming that it wasn't them who made the sound, he saw that they had the same doubts as him. Division commander, this is the retreat signal. After the 2 bugle masters recovered from their shock, they said in unison, "It really is the retreat signal. Retreat." After getting a definite answer, Kalu only hesitated for a moment before shouting loudly. As if he was afraid that the others didn't react quickly enough, he was the first to tighten the reins of his saber, and made a gesture of turning around. At this moment, the retreat signal was definitely the main force of the 5-star army. In other words, all the plans were in place, and the 1st Cavalry Division's mission was completed. At this moment, he didn't want to lose any of his cavalry brothers because after going through so many bloody battles, those who could still survive and continue to jump on their horses to kill the enemy would be the best of the best. If he kept one of these people, there would be more elite soldiers in the future. These were all treasures, and they couldn't afford to lose them. Chapter 1296. First, there was the signal to retreat. Next, there was Kulu's movement. Close to 1,000 five-star soldiers all turned their horses around and followed behind Kulu, quickly heading towards the exit of the canyon behind them. At this time, the 10,000 Kazakh riders led by Boda were only a little more than a mile away from them. For a real cavalry, this distance could be reached in about 100 breaths. However, when the five-star army suddenly retreated and fled, they were caught off guard. Although there were less than 1,000 of them, Boda, who had fought with them for several days, did not underestimate them. In his opinion, the five-star army was extremely difficult to deal with, as if they were made of iron. However, he did not expect that the bitter battle that he had imagined would not happen. Instead, the enemy had fled. After a moment of hesitation, Boda's face lit up with joy. Haha, did you see that? The five-star army is also human. They can run away too. Charge. Catch up with them and kill them. Let them know that the sabers in our hands can easily chop off the head of any enemy. The five-star army's cavalry had always been determined to fight to the last man no matter what kind of battle they faced. This was different from the battle Boda had imagined. He had always thought that a cavalry battle was a battle of one's fighting spirit. As long as one side suffered too many losses, their fighting spirit would collapse. At that time, it would be time for the victorious side to reap the fruits of their labor. This kind of rule was not practical for the five-star army. There was no such thing as their fighting spirit collapsing. They would always fight to the last man. Every time he took a step forward, he had to pay a heavy price. But now the five-star army had finally fled. At this moment, Boda felt a sense of relief. This was how cavalry should behave. The five-star army had returned to normal. Boda was overjoyed and shouted loudly as he led the 10,000 cavalry to charge forward. If it was said that the five-star army that dared to face him head-on would still make him somewhat fearful, then the five-star army that had lost their morale and only cared about fleeing was simply not worth his attention. He only needed to charge forward and slaughter them. At this point, the outcome of the battle seemed to have been decided. Boda could not help showing a victorious look on his face. Although he had paid a price this time, he had killed at least 7,000 of the five-star army's cavalrymen. This kind of achievement was enough to make him proud. Everyone else had been defeated by the five-star army, but he was the only one who had killed so many members of the five-star army and even chased after them. Wouldn't that make him the most powerful person? When he thought about how many people would look at him in a new light after this battle, the smug look on his face became more and more intense. He seemed to have already seen countless silvers, and the best official position waiting for him. Under Boda's command, the 10,000 cavalrymen's morale soared, and they charged even faster. They were getting closer and closer to the five-star army, which was less than 1,000 soldiers. 1.5 miles, 1 mile, less than 300 meters. Just as they were about to charge forward and kill to their heart's content, Kulu and the rest of the 1st Cavalry Division finally charged out of the canyon. When they walked out of Botian Mound, they saw the new army's main cavalry formation with their bows drawn. Commander. When Kulu saw Commander Su-hee, who was standing in front of the middle corps, his tears flowed out involuntarily. He did not cry when the 2nd Regiment was wiped out. He did not cry when the 3rd Regiment was wiped out. He did not cry when the 4th Regiment was wiped out. He did not cry even when he knew that he was going to die in battle. But now, at the moment when he saw Su-hee after the war, he couldn't stop his tears from flowing out. Su-hee's eyes were red as well. When he saw that the 1st Cavalry Division was left with less than 1,000 cavalrymen, he knew how tragic the battle was. So many good soldiers had died just like that. As the commander, he naturally felt terrible. However, he knew that this was not the time to reminisce about the past. It was the time for revenge. Commander Ko, quickly go and rest. The military's medical center is already prepared. You are all meritorious soldiers. You must persevere and survive. Now watch us take revenge for all of you. In this battle, The 1st Cavalry Division had perfectly executed their plan to lure the enemy in. They had been leading the enemy by the nose. Although the losses were not small in the end, it was worth it no matter how one looked at it. Kulu had made a wrong decision before, and caused Kulu to lose the position of commander. Now that he had made a great contribution, he should be the first choice when there was an empty position next time. Kulu was indeed exhausted. With such a big burden on his shoulders, he basically hadn't rested for the past few days. In addition to the injuries on his body, although they weren't fatal, if he didn't want to leave any sequelae, a good rest was necessary. He nodded and said, "All right, your subordinate will take his leave." Kulu left, but the real battle had only just begun. Following closely behind the 1st Cavalry Division was Boda and his 10,000 Kazakh cavalrymen. After turning a corner, they finally saw the exit of Batian Mound. Just as the army was thinking about how they could finally go all out, they were greeted by Changbo of the 4th Cavalry Division of the 3rd Cavalry Division, which had over 8,000 cavalrymen and archers ready to shoot their arrows at any moment. They had been running back and forth for the past few days. In order to make the enemy think that they had really fled, the 4th Cavalry Division had no choice but to leave with the main force. Now that they were finally back, Changbo was envious of the 1st Cavalry Division's achievements. When it was time for him to perform, he would not be polite. He shouted, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" This shout echoed countless times when it hit the huge rock at the entrance of the canyon. This shout made the 4th Cavalry Division's 5-star Army's archers' eyes spit fire. Their killing intent filled the sky. With this shout, the soldiers of the 4th Cavalry Division loosened their right arms. Immediately, countless arrows shot out from their hands, creating many pleasant whooshing sounds. A dense rain of arrows pierced through the air and smashed into the unprepared Kazakh cavalry. Soon, the sound of soldiers falling off their horses could be heard. From time to time, it was accompanied by cries of pain and alarm. 2 waves of arrows were released. More than 16,000 arrows were shot from afar, like a giant blade falling from the sky. 30% of the Kazakh cavalry vanguard was cut down. Unfortunately, Boda, the general, was also in the range of the arrows. When he turned the corner, he saw countless archers waiting for him. When he saw the neat formation of the 5-star Army soldiers, he knew that something was wrong. However, his opponent did not give him any chance to catch his breath or react. The arrows came at him as if they were free. He only swung his saber to cut down 3 arrows. Then the 4th arrow hit him in the chest, followed by the 5th, 6th, and 7th arrows. In a short period of time, he fell to the ground like a porcupine. Even until the moment of his death, he still did not understand where the 5-star Army had come from. Also, since the 5-star Army had so many brave soldiers, why were they in such a sorry state when they were chased by him? Was it really that fun to tease him? With the death of Boda, the Kazakh vanguard cavalrymen who had lost their commander and were heavily injured by the arrows immediately turned around and fled like headless flies. Their faces changed drastically, and they were no longer as high-spirited and complacent as they were when they came out of the canyon. Kill. The 2nd Cavalry Division's division commander Bai Kai and the 3rd Cavalry Division's division commander Lei Chuandang, who had been waiting by the side, roared. More than 10,000 cavalrymen charged into the canyon. The 2 cavalry divisions that had been holding back finally had a chance to use their skills. At this time, they could not wait to charge into the enemy's cavalrymen. They waved their sabers and killed in all directions. One chased while the other fled. In just a short period of time, everyone had changed their roles. The only difference was that the Kazakh cavalrymen were really fleeing. Moreover, they were fleeing with a goal in mind. They thought that once they could meet up with the main force, they could change the situation of being chased by the enemy. However, they did not know that the current situation of the main force was not much better than theirs. In fact, it was even worse. When the agreed time of attack arrived, Yang Chendong, who had been hiding above the canyon, gave the order to attack. It was above the canyon that Yang Chendong saw the bravery of the new army's 1st Cavalry Division with his own eyes. However, he did not move. This was not because Yang Chendong was cold-blooded. Instead, it was because he knew that impatience in small matters would spoil great plans. If they attacked now, they could help the 1st Cavalry Division suppress the enemy. However, before the 1st Cavalry Division was in position and sealed off the enemy's escape route, doing so would only cause the Kazakh cavalrymen to become vigilant. If that happened, the plan of cutting off the enemy's head, waist, and tail would be ruined. This was something that Yang Chendong absolutely could not allow to happen. He could only watch all of this happen and hope that the 1st Cavalry Division could survive this cruel and bloody battle. Fortunately, the 1st Cavalry Division was 16 hours ahead of schedule. This gave the 1st Cavalry Division a ray of hope. Although the losses were disastrous, there were still close to 1,000 cavalrymen who survived. With these 1,000 cavalrymen as the backbone, presumably the day when the 1st Cavalry Division was reorganized and restored to fighting strength would not be too far away. Seeing his own soldiers being bullied, Yang Chendong could finally retaliate. How could he be polite? Under his orders, the rocks piled up above the canyon tumbled down, disrupting the Kazakh army's formation. Then 10,000 guns were fired. Under the muzzles of the 3 cold vanguard divisions, bullets flew out. The enemy cavalrymen were like living targets, becoming targets. In an instant, they were shot into a hornet's nest. One by one, they fell from their horses. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.